Outdoor Heritage Council to order. It is June 17th, Wednesday, 8:30. Lovely Winona. After having a great tour yesterday, for those that were on it, thanks for coming. For those that missed it, I'm sorry you missed the great tour. First order of business is to call the roll.
Hartwell.
I'm here.
Hartwell present. Shara.
Here.
Shara present. Baird.
Present.
Baird present. Representative Burkle.
Burkle present.
Representative Burkle present. Eggerling.
Here.
Eggerling present. Senator Hurt.
Hurt present.
Senator Hurt present. Kaharski.
Kaharski here.
Kaharski present. Senator Lang. Palmer.
Present.
Palmer present. Saxog. Suss.
Here.
Suss present. Representative Vang.
Present.
Representative Vang present. Mr. Chair, there are 10 members present.
Great, we have a quorum. Next order of business is to approve the agenda. Can I get a motion to?
move, Sus.
You have a motion to approve the agenda. Any comments, questions, suggestions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. You were sent in the packet or online, the minutes of our last meeting. I'd like to approve them.
Motion so given.
We have a motion. Any corrections? Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Anyone need to report any conflicts of interest on today's agenda? Now, that are not, you and I have a conflict with approval of a conflict of plans for Audubon. As a packet, we can vote on it, but individually, we've already disclosed that conflict, so. Are there any new conflicts to report? Hearing none, we will assume there aren't. My comments, I'll keep them brief. We did have a nice tour. It started out kind of tough weather and ended up beautiful weather. We were all thinking in the morning the boat ride was going to be miserable, and it wasn't. It was very interesting. It was great to get out and see some of the projects. I don't think any of us have probably seen a prairie as magnificent as the one we wandered through mid-afternoon. So for those of you that missed it, I'm sorry, but it was a great thing, and thanks to staff for putting together a great tour. Other than that, we're gonna soon get the proposals for next year and talk about that process today. I have nothing else new to report, unless there are any questions for the chair. I'll turn it over to our executive director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members, and just echoing the gratitude for the excellent tour yesterday and all of our partners who did such a great job explaining the different habitats that we saw, the different kinds of projects that we saw, from the river bottoms through the WMA and up to the bluff and then back down onto the river. I thought it was a great, so thank you, Joe, for your extra time with the partners, and Tom for getting all of the logistics done, and of course members for such a good turnout this year to be able to be on the tour and hear from our partners. A couple items in your packet is information on 2 events that are coming up. I just want to draw your attention to both of them. One is on June 25th, the Mantrap Wildlife Management Area Grand Opening. This is up in Park Rapids. I believe many of you are familiar with this significant project. If you go to register, it may say that it's closed or that they've reached capacity, but they have held spots for Lessard-Sams members and staff. So if you're interested in going, please just ignore that it's closed and register so that they know what is all coming. I'll be there, and I'm sure others will be there as well. And then on Tuesday, June 30th is the Nelson Slough groundbreaking up in Carlston. It's a WMA as well. I've heard of other events in August and September. I'll forward those to you. Over the last few weeks, we've had the opportunity to attend a couple different events led by our partners, which has been great. We were up at Blackcliff, near Duluth, it's a WMA. We were out at DU had an event out in Orange. WPA, which is Neuro Safest, and we were able to benefit from a prairie pothole tour as well. So thank you to our partners for including us in these events, and members, if you're able to attend, it's always a nice way to see the good work on the ground. The other item I had is, I apologize today, there's a meeting conflict with LCCMR, and I know for sure Senator Herr has a conflict and a couple of nonpartisan staff. Director Nash and I will work more closely together in the future, that if our meeting dates are shifting, that we avoid these conflicts. I know that's difficult for folks to be in two places at once. So again, I apologize for the meeting overlap here with LCC. We'll be more attentive in the future on these meeting dates. And that is all that I have.
Great, any questions? Tom was giving me a signal and I was misinterpreting.
Oh. Well, I think. Mr. Chair, is it all okay if I just roll right into the status?
Absolutely,
Okay.
I just want to make sure we didn't miss it.
Yeah, no, we won't miss it. Thank you, Tom. So members, in your packet is a report, it's a program status and spending update. This is provided, from my understanding, every year. Members requested this to understand program efficiencies and the expenditure of outdoor heritage funds ahead of your in-depth process of reviewing all of the proposals. Sandy Smith has provided 3 different reports in your packet. One is an overall summary. The second attachment details out the acquisition spending in the open programs. And the last is a summary of the closed appropriation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sandy to walk us through them.
Yeah, very quickly, I think I've mentioned in the past that this is always a challenge for me to get specific things that council members want. So I'm always open to suggestions and additional questions that may be helpful for you. Just let me know. And I just want to go over these 3 handouts in detail so that you understand them and can use them as a resource like later on. So the attachment 1 is just kind of a summary of where the individual appropriation bills are with closure of programs and amount of money spent. The columns that are in peach kind of coordinate, and then the columns in blue coordinate. And so you'll see, for example, in ML 20, we had 40 programs, 8 of which are still open. The total amount of the 40 is 107, 131. And the total amount of the 8 that are open, the total amount of their award was 29, 361. And then the balance left in those is of the 8 that are open is 22, 252. So that kind of helps you. And if you're wondering of those 8, who are they? What is their status? I kind of have a column then on the right-hand side that sort of says, well, you know, if somebody has an extension, if they're just following up on restoration enhancement, and things like that. So hopefully that this is understandable to all of you, and of course, reach out if you have questions. The handout number 2 is sort of, this is acquisition spending to date. And I know several council members have asked in the past about, well, how fast are people spending money? And acquisition is a very easy one to measure because it has a date that usually is before the end of the appropriation, and then the appropriation stays open sometimes to restore the lands that were bought. And I don't really evaluate the restoration enhancement programs for speed and completion, just because those programs go on for a long time. And, you know, they can use up their whole full 5 years. And so that's not like necessarily a measurable thing, because we'd have to look at every single project, how much has been spent. So when I read the status updates, I read the narrative, and I can generally tell from the narrative how they're doing, if they have any problems. Things I've seen in the past are, we're having a hard time getting seed. We had bad rain that, you know, is prohibiting us from doing our work this year. And so I'll kind of follow up on those things, but there's not really a metrics to measure that. So I just chose to kind of highlight acquisition. So the ML22 programs, I did update since the status update, just because their acquisition expires here in a couple of weeks. And I went into the system then and I looked at what they had acquired in the status update versus what has been entered in the system since then, so I can hopefully bring something more accurate to you just for the ML22 programs. And so you'll see I kind of have a fee balance and an easement balance and which programs are kind of open with how many dollars. ML23 did not update because they technically have another year to get their acquisition done, but I did want to highlight those that have already completed their acquisition. So that you can have a sense of spending and that they're out of their money, even though those programs may stay open to restore the lands they acquired, they are done with their acquisition dollars. So, and I did the same with 24 and also with 25. And, while I was doing this, just generally, I've never really seen this many, acquisitions closed, this early. So 24 and 25 somewhat surprised me that there were, people that had already, completed their acquisition dollars. So if you have any questions other than this, I'm happy to take them. And then the attachment 3 is just sort of a summary of where are we at with overall spending of our bill. And so generally you can see that we have very little turn back, only 2 to 3 to 4% generally. The 6% and 15% they kind of stand out because there were specific nuances those years where there was a large acquisition program that did not get completed due to various circumstances. And so that happened at the last minute, and so there was a larger turn back. If anybody wants details on those, I have them. But, overall, you can see that partners, 3%, 2% is great, great spending. So I guess with that, I will just say, again, this is a snapshot in time because things are constantly changing and being done. And if anybody would like any other metrics or any other measurements, I'm happy to provide them. And if I get individual emails from members, I will work on the task and forward it out to all members so everybody has that information.
Andy, do you have any sense on the 2022 programs, the balance left, which is 14 million on your 6/10 date? Do you have any sense of the likelihood of spending of that 14 million in the last 20 days?
Yeah, I mean, there are programs that, will say, oh, we have 5, ready to close. And so like of those 5, I noticed that maybe 2 of them had already closed then since the update. That said, there are certain programs that promise closures that don't happen. There are programs that have been counting money as projects as closed, that then we find out later on DNR did not reimburse them for that. And so then they're backpedaling from their acres and dollars. And so everybody kind of has some special circumstances in those cases. I'm optimistic, but I would say that this is a large amount of money to get done in the next couple of weeks. And I do know some of these will be turning back dollars for sure.
So related to that, we're gonna go into an allocation process, and it seems like in December, we get the real budget numbers of what's been turned back. Is there any way that you're gonna be able to know after the 1st of July, how much of this money was actually spent and how much is likely to be turned back and available for spending again instead of waiting till December?
Yeah, so there's 2 parts to this. The number 1 part is I can look in the system, and if managers update their parcels that have closed, I could give a revised version of this. But as far as us having turned back, that is a process with the state SWIFT accounting system, and it does not work as fast as we would like it. And so programs don't technically close out until the final report is approved, and then their final payment is made. So that can take a year. So even though I may get a final report, that money has to go through the process, and I trust that MMB will reflect the most accurate numbers in that case.
So the
But-
answer is we can't anticipate what's gonna happen in the MMB forecasting.
Yes, this will not help with the MMB forecast, but this will help if I update this as a tool for members.
Okay,
That's,
it's a great tool. I was looking for,
yeah, well, you know, government, we work slow. But I always trust MMB, rather than my,
okay,
amounts, so.
thank you.
So clarification from my part then, so the 15 million that's still sitting there for assumption's sake, it doesn't get spent, so what point in time then? We get that back then next year, is what I'm hearing, we don't get it back for this year in time for,
We don't usually. We're given an estimate of how much money in July. Usually there's an adjustment in December after we've made our initial allocation. Which includes turnbacks that finally got processed by MMB. But we can't predict. I was hoping Sandy could help us predict how much that would be, so we could include it in what we allocate
right?
in October. But the answer is no.
Yeah,
So this is the 2022 program, so they have effectively from where we're at today. 4 years effectively to use that funding, is that correct?
No, the 2022, they have to have it essentially spent by June 30th of this year.
Right, so that's the 4 years, I guess I'm saying,
Yeah.
22, 23, 24, 25, and
But until they submit their final report and it's signed off on it, MMB doesn't give us availability of that money.
got it, understand, thank
and
you.
the other caveat here is that the acquisition closes in a few weeks.
But
But
the
then the
restoration
program can
doesn't.
stay open for another chunk of time, 4, 5 years.
So-
We've changed it over the years, but, and so then they're still open, so nothing's being turned back then until 2029.
So, for example, and I'll just pick on the first one, Minnesota Prairie Recovery has $1.5 million. And they have to spend the fee acquisition by the end of June. But if they have restoration dollars in there and they don't spend any of the fee, they have another couple of years to do the restoration, and we don't have the availability of the $1.5 million they didn't spend, that they no longer can spend.
So maximum amount of time a program could be open is 9 years.
9 years.
If they do the last minute for the acquisition and then the very last minute for the restoration.
So the clock is different. So,
Yes, yes.
so they get 4 years to spend for fee title or easement acquisition.
Yeah.
And then the clock doesn't start for restoration until after
The closing date.
that closes down.
Yeah.
Okay. That I never understood. So
Yeah, it's in our appropriation availability language that's in our bill. It's kind of written funky, but yeah, that's the,
But the purpose of that is,
Yeah.
Someone does an acquisition 3.5 years in.
Yeah.
You wanna give them time to do the restoration after that, so it's not like someone's gaming the system.
Well, and
It's
it,
just
yeah,
hard for us to predict what will be available in December that we weren't aware of when we did our allocation.
well, and it's not like, they may have multiple acquisitions they're working on. They got all of these done, maybe in the first 2 years, and they're still working on this last. So it's not like they're dawdling in most cases.
no, it's acceptable.
Yeah.
You'll notice like with the 25 programs, the ones that have acquisition that are complete, they're already starting on the restoration. So then they'll be able to close probably within 4 or 5 years because they already have the acquisition part done.
So, okay, this is a really good question. So let's say a project is gonna do 5 acquisitions. They finish the first 2 in the first year and a half. Does the clock on the 5 years start for those then?
Each parcel's clock starts when they close.
Okay.
So It's, you have to track like, what is the closing date, then they get the 4, years, and so. In the end, you may only have one parcel that's left using up the last 3 years and everything else is done, but it's not officially closed back to MMB to reflect. In the statement.
That's very helpful, thank you, I never understood any of that, so.
So it would appear like 23, they still have funding, some not near as much as 22, but by the, 24 and 25, are they? Apparently doing that much better at spending their funds, having identified projects, and spending them?
24 and 25 are just the list of those that got it all done.
Yeah,
Okay,
It isn't the list of everything that's open.
got it.
yep, this is only represents acquisition, because as I earlier explained, the restoration enhancement, it's really hard to.
But the 24 and 25 numbers don't include open acquisition dollars. It's just closed, showing some folks actually got it done.
Yeah, whatever they had in their acquisition budget is spent, but that doesn't mean the whole appropriation is spent, because it's still open to restore.
And there are other appropriations that are still open for acquisition. This isn't the completed list of all acquisitions.
Right, so I just chose to highlight those that have been completed. If they're,
So you're really looking at two reports. You're looking at 22 and 23 open acquisition, 24, 25
Totally did it. Acquisition. I was say, boy, we're doing a lot better job. 22 and 22, and you get 24 and 25 based on the information.
yeah, I can see
Thank
where
you for that
that is
clarification.
confusing, and I apologize, this is
That's
just.
all right.
This is the pat on the back list, the 24 and 25.
Good job.
Yep,
Job, guys.
Please.
Mr. Chair, members, just to add a little bit of fusion.
Oh, good.
Oh, good, yeah.
So if you remember in our recommendations package last year, we added some language in there that says reimbursement of eligible expenses must be submitted no later than 12 months after the approval of the final report. And so that was to get people to get their final reports in so that it can be closed out sooner, so that that money can be available to appropriate. So we're working on it for the council to
thanks, Joe.
get the money out there.
So the hope is in future years, we get that money back sooner for
Just
the
a little
allocation.
soon.
Just trying to poke them.
The hope.
Down the poke.
And what I think is somewhat happening with 22 is we had a lot of extensions in 18, 19, 20
Yeah.
due to COVID. And so, we're kind of still catching up. Some of those programs are still catching up.
That's what I was thinking, yes, that. Not to get too judgy about these people, it's the COVID effect.
Yeah, I would say, yeah.
Well, and, I'll pick on Minnesota Prairie Recovery. They had 4.5 million, they only have 1.5 million left, so it's not like they've done nothing.
Yeah.
Percentage wise, they've spent 75% of their money. There's just a piece left that is hanging out there. 75% was my rounding.
And I did try to put in some little notes, where I could glean information from the status updates. Kind of showing like if they had, things encumbered that we're expecting to close, so you can kind of get a sense. In a couple of situations, I'm just gonna mention Dakota County. I got word from DNR that the couple of acquisitions that they had on the table fell through. So that might be an actual amount that will be turned back, in that particular case. But I don't have details off the top of my head for everybody.
A helpful report, thank you.
So your Metro Rivers in 2022, phase 12. Do you think the 5 that are advancing are effectively going to eat up? 1.7?
According to the status update, there are 5 that are advancing and that they'll close on time, and so. We're thinking that'll eat up that money, but, as David pointed out, I can update this. In July, end of July, and kind of give you a report back on the status the 22s at least. Things are constantly happening, so this is
Sure.
really tough to tell
It's
you.
a snapshot in time.
Yep, it is.
And I think
Snapshot
if we
time.
could see that specifically the 22 numbers in July, that would be helpful.
And this will also get managers to update their things in the system as soon as possible.
Because they don't want us to read about things they didn't update.
Yeah. So,
Okay? Any other questions? Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you for going through that.
Excellent. Anything else from you, Kristen? Great, next we're gonna move on to the accomplishment plans. We have seen these accomplishment plans in December, the updated ones. There were, I'll let staff talk about it, but there were some minor tweaks. Nothing has significantly changed from what we saw and approved on a preliminary basis in December. Everything is sitting here, and until we approve these accomplishment plans, the money that's available July 1st under the new bill that was passed is unavailable. So if we chose to not approve any accomplishment plans, all our partners would not be starting their projects July 1st. So it's important that we do the approval of the accomplishment plan. The one thing to highlight is that the Rosso Lake project has a modified accomplishment plan, obviously, since the language doesn't allow them to spend money until the 1st of January. But nothing else changed with that. It's gonna be consistent with obviously what the bill language was. Everything else about it stayed the same. So, you wanna go or Christina talk about any tweaks or anything that I just missed?
Mr. Chair and members, there's not a lot to add. This is the last step in our annual process. So once these documents go live, these are the guiding documents for all of the appropriations starting July 1st. If you go and look at your spreadsheet, the 11/17, called out just a couple things that are the council should look at, but there are no major issues. We always are looking at whether or not the personnel and DSS funds have increased. So remember the February forecast, there's about 3.2 million extra dollars available for allocation. So that was prorated amongst all the projects. And so not only did the project managers have to update their parcel list and anything that they wanted to update in their accomplishment plan, they also had to update their budgets. And so we looked at the budgets to see how they allocated those additional funds, which really sometimes it was $40,000 to $80,000. It wasn't a ton of money. But you'll see FAO2, they added a bit to their personnel and DSS. Didn't think it was totally unreasonable. And then the council, we talked about the last meeting, we talked about the expenses and the definitions under those. And we called out for MLT, some contract information and personnel. So that's something that the council should look at and make sure that they're comfortable with it. And if everyone is comfortable with everything that you see, we can approve them and they can start spending money July 1st and getting money out the door into the ground. And MLT is here. I think Wayne is here. If you have questions on the personnel definitions and then the outreach activities, especially the videographers and video production, that kind of stuff. So if there's any questions, MLT is here to answer those.
And their update is really in compliance with the action we tried at the last meeting, so it's. If there are questions, there are questions, but that is the update. I would be happy to take a motion to approve the amended accomplishment plans as presented.
So moved.
You can choose whoever you want. There was Ted, Kristen, and Daryl who all wanted to approve it.
Ladies first. Ladies first.
Spoke up. All right, we have.
What about that second?
You can make it second, it doesn't count. Not under the Mason's rules. Any comments, questions, concerns? I just want to, before we even vote, thank both the staff for reading all of the minutia that they had to read. And all of the project managers who had to modify everything they've already done. We know it's extra work and we appreciate both groups doing what it takes to get us to this point where we can spend money. So with that, Tom, you'll call the roll.
Member starting with number 3 on our list, Baird.
Aye.
Baird, aye. Representative Burkle.
Burkle, aye.
Representative Burkle, aye. Eggerling.
Aye.
Eggerling, aye. Senator Hurt.
Aye.
Senator Hurt, aye. Kaharski.
Gaharsky, aye.
Kaharski, aye. Palmer.
Palmer, aye.
Palmer, aye. Suss.
Suss, aye.
Suss, aye. Representative Vang.
Bang, aye.
Representative Vang, aye. Hartwell.
Aye.
Hartwell, aye. Shara.
Aye.
Shara, aye. Mr. Chair, there are 10 ayes, 0 nays.
Great, motion passes. Our project partners can start their work, which is great.
July 1.
Long process, what?
July 1.
July 1. Yes, they can start spending money July 1. Which is great. I mean, we've gone through this whole process and we're done. Now the work begins. Very exciting to have that done. Next is just a discussion presentation on conflict of interest procedures as we go into the next round of allocation. Who's doing that? Then,
It's in the Office of Grants Management.
okay, Naomi, we're turning it over to you. Thank you for being with us. I think you're unmuted and ready to go.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Thank you. I'll just need a moment as I I'm not. Can everyone?
We can hear you, yes.
Naomi, if you were looking to share your screen, you should see that green arrow at the bottom. Otherwise, I'm happy to pull up your PowerPoint as well.
Yes. Here's what was can everyone hear me? Okay. I think what had happened was because I apologize. I was listening on YouTube and there's a delay. So
Yeah.
So now I paused the YouTube. Thank you for your grace. This is my first time with this experience. So yes, I will quickly work to share my screen and I'll ask for grace for that and we'll get going here. So let's see.
Tom said a green arrow at the bottom.
Oh, green. Yes, I'm seeing that. And is everyone seeing my screen yet?
Not yet.
I'm not.
Okay. I'll keep. How about now?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Naomi Munster. I'm the Director of Policy with the Office of Grants Management at the Department of Admin. Good to be with all of you. And I've been invited to give a brief overview of Policy 0801, Conflict of Interest in Grant Making. And so as we move, and let me make sure that now that my screen is moving, here we go. My deck is moving. I'll give some background on the policy and the topic. So executive branch agencies, boards, councils, and task forces may have additional and unique statutes, rules, and policies that are related to conflict of interest. And so the statutory provisions, which are referenced at the bottom of this slide, really fall into two types of categories. There's the category of the process of grant award and grant administration. And then there's the category of the roles of the individuals involved in grant award and grant administration. And so these requirements extend both to the executive branch and others. Now I'll provide an overview of the policy itself. So Policy 0801 requires Minnesota state agencies, executive branch boards, committees, authorities, task forces, and councils to deliberately avoid conflicts of interest at both the individual and the organizational levels. The policy highlights transparency as a guiding principle. It identifies the scope and the minimum requirements of the grant process type, and it provides definitions and procedure steps. The policy also incorporates requirements that we in the executive branch have for code of ethical conduct, for a policy that is maintained by MMB and applicable to every executive branch employee. So next we'll talk about guiding principles for both the topic and the policy. You'll hear this, that all state agencies, executive branch boards, committees, authorities, task forces, and councils must work to deliberately avoid conflicts of interest related to grant making and grant administration at both the individual and the organizational levels. We also want to ensure that there's proactive communication and steps that are taken to address, resolve, and document conflicts of interest as they arise. When a conflict of interest concerning state grant making exists, transparency is the guiding principle in addressing it. For the executive branch, agencies can consult with their agency's ethics officer as appropriate when that resource is needed. And the three takeaways here really are: be aware, be thoughtful, and embrace transparency. So next we'll talk about what a conflict of interest is. It's a situation where the actual or potential duty or loyalty to more than one organization exists, and those competing duties or loyalties may result in adverse actions to one or both parties. So one takeaway here is that a conflict of interest can exist even if no unethical, improper, or illegal act results from it. So in looking at the information in the green, we'll touch on actual and potential. So an actual conflict of interest occurs when a person's decision or action would compromise that duty to a party without taking immediate action to eliminate the conflict. A potential exists if a person has a relationship, affiliation, or other interests that could create an inappropriate influence if the person is called on to decide or a recommendation is made that could affect one or more of the relationships, affiliations, or interests. Now we'll talk about an individual conflict of interest and some examples. It can occur if a state employee or a grant reviewer uses their status to obtain special advantage with a grantee or an applicant, receives or accepts something of value from a grantee or an applicant, and is an employee or board member of a grantee or applicant, or is an immediate family member of an owner, employee, or board member of an applicant. So the processes that are covered through the policy include these two different types of activities. The first, in competitive grant making, it addresses developing grant requests for proposals and reviewing and evaluating proposal responses. The second category of process are under grant administration. So that includes awarding a grant, drafting, entering, amending, or revising grant agreements, conducting grant monitoring, evaluating grant performance, and authorizing payments. So the minimum requirements in policy we'll see on this slide. First, appointed members that are serving on an executive branch board, committee, authority, task force, or council involved in RFP development for competitive grant processes must follow their established policy, procedure, or bylaws for code of conduct, code of ethics, financial disclosures, or grant conflict of interest, and the Office of Grants Management Policy 0801. Second, all grant reviewers must complete and sign a conflict of interest disclosure form for every competitive grant review they participate in. And third, the grant-making entity must maintain the documentation of the signed conflict of interest disclosure form. For financial disclosures for public officials referenced in Chapter 10A, the grant-making entity must document that they've reviewed those financial disclosures. So this is a resource slide. We have information on our website for all our policies, including conflict of interest. We have some training and development materials, and then there's a link to our website as well. So I can pause for any questions.
Great. Do we have any questions? I would say from a practical standpoint, what this says is as you're reading the proposals this year, track of anything that sticks out as, ooh, that might be seen by someone as a conflict in disclosure. Daryl and I both did this last year. I don't know when Daryl figured out there was a potential conflict. I didn't have a clue until I read the proposal and saw that an organization I was part of was going to have work done on it if Audubon received the grant. I had no knowledge until that point. So if I had filled out my conflict of interest form based on who had applied for money, it would have been wrong. So read your proposals, fill out the form when you submit your scores, put the conflict of interest form in with it at that time.
So when you say part of the organization, general members? Or if you're on a board?
If you're on a board, if you have influence, if you are a member of Pheasants Forever and you send them $50 a year, that doesn't put you in a conflict position. But if you're on the board of Pheasants Forever and they've applied, it puts you in a conflict position.
My conflict was I had just done documentation to receive funding for a habitat project through Audubon. They had approached me about doing a project and I had just done that, and here we were going to be reviewing their funding requests. So I disclosed that I had what I viewed as a potential conflict because I was getting funding from them.
And the money we were doing wasn't the money Daryl was getting, but the perception could be such. And Daryl did the right thing by saying, because of the perception, I don't want to take any action that would be perceived as tit for tat kind of thing. So as you read your proposals, you'll, if anything flags, call the staff. They're happy to help walk through it. Call me. But more disclosure is better than less. Because what you don't want is someone to say, after we've gone through the process, that person should have been conflicted, their vote shouldn't have counted. And throw all of us sort of into a place of supporting a potential conflict. Any other questions? We thank you for reminding us of this, and, if something comes up, I assume you're available to answer questions as well.
I can be, and I'd also work with your leadership too, based on scope, but absolutely, yep.
Great.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to. No, she's not. You what? So we have someone else who is on who didn't make a comment, so we're gonna assume that there was agreement.
Was there a question? I just wanted,
I don't think there was a question. There was, Catherine Sherman Hoying was
oh, yeah,
on this for a while because she's with grants management who works with us.
yes,
But there weren't any questions and she must not have felt like she needed to add any comments, so we're good to go.
okay, wonderful. I also know she has a commitment for testimony at a different meeting, so, yeah, okay. Thank you all, take care, have a good day. Thanks.
Next, we're gonna move on to agenda item 8, discussion of the proposal review process. I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, the proposal review process starts way early in our review of the council's review of the criteria and the call for funding, and then releasing that call for funding, and proposers coming in and asking questions and working hard to get their proposals in final form. So we thought it would be helpful. We followed a little bit of a different process this year for the call for funding. Redmond will provide overview related to that. And then also, we thought it'd be helpful based on feedback we've heard from council, just to do a little 101 on the proposal review process. So we'll walk through that as well.
Great, so Tom, we're gonna turn it over to you, but before we do that, happy birthday.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy birthday. It's a good day for a birthday down here in Winona. I'm gonna share my screen here. I've got a couple slides just to go over the proposal call for funding request process this year. So the general process, we as staff release a press release, and that is typically through a third-party organization that distributes the press release to media outlets. Then we see news coverage of the press release itself and the general call for funding. And then beyond that, we receive proposals. So we distribute the press release to several different entities. So this year in the legislature, that would be by email to all members of the House, all members of the Senate, as well as relevant legislative staff. So the relevant legislative staff, that was a new addition this year to the contact list, was to include committee staff and as well as public relations and communications staff for House GOP and DFL. Within the units of government side, we have the Association of Minnesota Counties, as well as the League of Minnesota Cities, as well as tribal contacts. So that would be tribal natural resource leaders, as well as relevant staff within each sovereign nation. As we also have a distribution list for watershed districts, lake associations, and state and local news media. That would be from our internally maintained LSOHC media list. General timeline for this year. We sent out the call for funding request. The first press release, as well as the call for funding, opens on April 1st. This year, we distributed the press release via Globe Newswire, also known as Notified as the company, and we'd like to thank Councilmember Kuharski, who was able to connect me with staff at Padilla at his organization, who gave some very helpful and thoughtful advice on press release distribution in general, and were able to connect us with Globe Newswire. So on April 1st as well, that's when we would send out an email to our internal subscribers. Then we have May 7th, we have a secondary press release, which goes out to remind folks that the deadline is approaching. You have 2 weeks to apply. Then we have the deadline on May 22nd. So throughout that entire time, we're sending out weekly updates on throughout the legislative session. And within those weekly updates, we would mention the call for funding request is live. Here's a link to the request for proposals. Please ask us questions. And we saw news coverage throughout, primarily concentrated around the press releases, but as well as organic coverage in between both of those times. So this year we have some more detailed stats. We had over 20,000 views in total of the press release itself across 10,000 unique readers. We had 8,000 clicks of our link, which is directly to our website for the call for funding. Sorry?
The slide.
Yeah, we're on the right slide.
Okay, sorry.
Then we had 1,085 release placements, which means an actual coverage of our press release. So that could be an agency that, a media outlet that covers the headline of our press release, and the content may be descriptive. That could be someone that is covering our press release in general, as exactly as it was sent out. So that really runs the gambit between paid outlets that are receiving press releases and running them in general. That also includes organizations like the Associated Press and their affiliate sites. We have NBC and Fox affiliate stations, so that's local media across the state and the country. We also saw an increase in coverage by legislators, so that's in legislative updates sent out by members of the House and the Senate, as well as social media posts. Here's a few examples on the right of local and state media that covered our press release this year, which we always like to see. So in general, we had a record number of 62 proposals, which increased from 57 last year. We also see 7 organizations that have never applied for outdoor heritage funds in the past, which is one of the general goals of the sending out of the press release is to encourage organizations to be aware that the funding exists, that they may be eligible. So that is a promising result. And this chart here at the bottom shows that we had an increase in web traffic fairly significantly this year. So, for example, the visits to the call for funding page more than doubled from last year in the same time period. So as I mentioned, the coverage by legislators increased significantly, which is definitely something we like to see. We know that constituents and relevant organizations certainly read what goes out from the legislators themselves. And as I mentioned too, that the media outlet coverage by media outlets increased fairly significantly as well. The challenge with that is that doesn't always mean it's relevant news agencies. The challenge is getting the press release and the call for funding info into media outlets that would be read by potential applicants, the folks within Minnesota that we are hoping to make aware. In general, I would say the results from the current approach are positive. As I mentioned, we saw increases on several fronts. I think the questions for the future would be, how can we in general reach our intended audience even better? So are there additional interest groups in the way that we reach out to counties and cities and lake associations? Are there additional groups that have distribution within that we should be sending to? Should we be doing direct outreach to particular reporters or particular interest groups? And that could even be staff frequently will go present to a conference of watershed districts, for example. Are there more opportunities within that realm of the world for staff to get the word out? And then one other consideration we've thought of is, could we encourage outside agencies or interest groups to run our press release themselves? So that's sort of where we're at. We just wanted to give you a general overview of the process this year. If there are any questions specific to the call for funding, I'd be happy to answer. Yeah.
You said that there were 62 proposals we received. Were all 62 moved forward, or were there some that didn't meet the?
That report is coming.
Oh,
This
sorry.
is true. Yes.
I didn't mean to jump ahead.
Oh, that's okay.
Tom on the spot.
That's okay. Yeah, there were a few more even beyond 62 that were determined to be ineligible right off the bat. Just based on, for example, we have the threshold request has to be $500,000 or higher. So that's an easy bar. There are a few where it's been more complex to determine for staff if this is eligible or not.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Tom, going back to your press coverage stats for a second there. The clicks and that you've got, and so who and what monitors those? So I serve on an airport commission, and
Sure.
we got a lot of detail on how we get our links, where they come from and where they go to on our page. Are those link clicks actually going directly to the page for request for funding or just our home page?
Yes, yeah, so that, as far as I'm aware, that is going directly to the call for funding on our website.
Okay,
Mhm.
and do we have a Facebook?
We don't have a Facebook, we do have an Instagram, the Outdoor Heritage Fund has an Instagram. But we have not been able to successfully, the Outdoor Heritage Fund did in the past have a Facebook, the account is no longer able to be logged into. Is the easiest way to say that.
Okay, could we create a different one?
We've been working on that possibility, it's more challenging than I would have expected
I
at the
would
beginning,
expect so,
yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Because on our airport side, and we've had a media campaign about some changes in flights, and our Facebook page gets way more links, and we've got a lot more data to show actually how things are coming through for us, so
Yeah.
I would just encourage you to
Yeah,
try and get that job done before next
sure,
call for funding, but.
yeah,
And I also think that would be helpful for us as we try to showcase things that we've done. Even as far as the tours, I saw people taking pictures and videos, even when we were out, would be good to have that out in front of the public and. Everybody seems to use Facebook as a,
Of a certain generation.
yes, yeah.
yeah.
But anyway,
absolutely.
yeah, I'd like to see that if we could.
Yeah.
Be done, and I acknowledge that sometimes those login efforts can be a lot of fun things happen.
Uh-huh.
Yes. We'll leave it at that.
Yep. Yeah, the question is more so, it seems that we will not be able to recover the old account, so do we can't delete it either, so is it fine to have two Outdoor Heritage Fund pages, or do we just abandon Facebook? That's sort of been the consideration where we're at, but you're absolutely right, Facebook gets a lot of engagement, so I'd be happy to look into
Yeah,
that.
I would prefer that we don't abandon it. I prefer we try to find a solution. I know what the rest of the board think, but that's my input.
Chair Hartwell, I have a comment.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Tom, let's talk offline. I might be able to get someone from our staff to help you navigate that and figure that out, because that's something we've had to deal with some of our clients.
Okay, yeah, that would
Thank
be
you, Matt.
excellent, thank you
Thanks,
so
Matt.
much.
Great.
Well, if there are no other questions, Mr. Chair and members, I'd like to turn it over to Joe, and staff will provide a walkthrough of the proposal and how we can evaluate them in general.
Great. So, Joe?
Mr. Chair and members, you should have an example or a draft of the RFP or the request for funding. So I was thinking that we would just go through this, and then, Mr. Chair, you've done this for a few years, so you might have some comments or
Sure. Or other
different
kinds as
way,
well.
of interpreting the information, but we'll just start it on the first page, so proposal title, obviously that's self-explanatory, and then we have the funds requested, that's the total amount that they're requesting. Confirmed leverage funds, these are funds that the proposer has said they have in hand, they are confirmed, so that's gonna be different than what you see in the leverage table. Which is a different table that we've had now this year. And so just pay attention to that. You can have different types of leverage, but this is confirmed, so they're saying we have it in hand, and we thought that was important to put at the front of this proposal. And then the scalability question, so that's, again, can you receive less than what you asked for, and the proposal can say yes or no, and if they say that it's scalable, then later on, they'll talk about what it means to be scalable for their project. Going down the location information, that is from the parcel list and not from anywhere else. So if they don't put any parcels in the parcel list, then there's no county location in there. So for those projects like RIM, they don't usually have like a list of projects. Those are this will be blank, and then you'll go back into the criteria and look at how they decide to select the parcels. Eco regions, same thing, the proposer requests those, They put that in there, activity types, you can enhance, you can protect and feed, you guys know, all about that. For some reason. Sorry. Yeah. I had vertigo and I'm going back and forth between.
Would you like someone to?
Yeah, I gotta get my eyes to go back and forth.
Tom worked on this with you. Are you comfortable or do you want me to?
Sure, yeah, could you just, sorry, I was trying to pull up this to screen share. Could you tell me what section we're at here?
We are under the activity types, we just covered the other, there are no other activities listed this year, and that highlighted section in your version.
Okay, very good. Yep, so the activity types that's selected by proposers, so whatever you see here is exactly what they have chosen to mark as a activity type from their proposal. The other is an option that we provide in case there are in case there is an activity type beyond restore, protect, enhance. There are no other activities listed in this. Oh, yes. Oh, Kara, do you recall by chance
Otter Trail is at least one.
Oh, okay.
There are at least two that have it.
I gotcha. We'd have to go back and look at the proposals to see exactly what those other activities listed are, but generally we see proposals come in as restore, protect, enhance. And then we have two categories, one for protect and fee, which is direct land acquisition, and one as protect and easement. The priority resources addressed by the activity, that is another selection made by proposers to indicate which areas of the state, which ecological types the proposed work is to be included in. So we have included in the example, in the template proposal, we have the criteria included, which is to describe, to list rather which criteria each question and section applies to directly. So that is to help in members evaluating proposals to note that the answer from abstract, for example, should apply to criteria 1. So this is an example where the clear and concise summary is important to be able to, to be able to answer the who, what, when, where, and why, and how. To be able to answer that from the included answer in the abstract should be important. So this is generally the narrative summary of the program objectives itself, whereas the design and scope of work in the next section can be a similar sort of narrative description, but this is where we'd be looking for more technical details for the proposer to explain specific habitat that will be affected, as well as their direct actions, as well as the level of stakeholder involvement and partnership is another piece that we'd be looking for in that section. If we move along to how the proposal addresses habitat protection, restoration, or enhancement, this is a general answer that we'd be looking for to describe the habitat component of the proposal, to see any particular considerations when it comes to threatened or endangered species, as well as a general answer about wildlife and habitat benefits. If we look at the elements of this proposal that are critical from a timing perspective, this is one question where you may see a variety of different answers depending on how a proposer interprets that question. So this question is important for members to consider and evaluate, and to see how their answer is based on urgency to consider this with your perspective and your judgment as critical from a timing perspective could mean a variety of different things. So answers there could be, per se, there's a large acquisition proposed that might be significant in a timing perspective, in that the opportunity may not exist long into the future, whereas direct restoration enhancement projects may be less critical from a timing perspective, only in that the opportunity may not disappear 6 months from now, for example.
Tom, pull the screen ahead, because you're on the next page.
Thank you.
Not too far.
Yep. Okay. Right here now? Yeah, right.
Sorry to mess you up.
No, that's okay. Trying to do both at the same time here. Let's see. Yeah, we're in the right spot, right? So we have, in asking about habitat corridors or complexes, just like we heard on the tour yesterday, there is a certain element of building of corridors and complexes that's encouraged among a lot of conservation work. So in this question, we're asking, does your proposal build upon lands with existing conservation or habitat protection status? So if, for example, the easement that we saw yesterday is next to a WMA, which is next to an additionally protected space. So that's sort of the general answer that we're looking for here is, does this proposal build upon or expand in those areas? And this applies directly to criteria 4, which is specifically mentions improving or expanding habitat corridors or complexes. Conservation plans referenced in the next question. This is the overarching science-based long-term conservation plans. So in that moment, in this question, we're looking to see, does the proposal have a plan that is serving as the scientific basis for their proposal? So this is a question where we're giving multiple different options to select for proposers, as well as another category where they could be listing anything beyond what is already listed. So this is essentially for reviewers to be able to see there is a plan guiding this proposal's decision making, and it is, science or conservation plan based. If we look at the section priorities, these are pulled from the ecological section visions, which is originally written in the 25-year plan. Comes from directly the appendix C, which is planning and managing for results. And then these ecological section visions are included each year in the call for funding.
And I would just say, this is interesting information, but there's very little work that ever comes in that doesn't apply to some plan somewhere. So don't spend too much time worrying about it.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But it's important that we have the information so we know it's according to a plan. But don't spend a lot of time worrying about that, because you'll drive yourself crazy.
Yeah.
I think that's important for if you have a project that's a little different, then that would be something where if you want to restore the woodland character, that would be something where you'd want to know, do we have a plan for that? But in general, history, cheers.
So if we move on to the significant permanent conservation legacy and or outcomes for fish, game, and wildlife. So this is another one where you might see a variety of different answers. This is obviously dependent on some amount of opinion and perspective. So this question applies directly to criteria 5. It's more or less the exact same wording. So here we're looking to see, does the proposal describe the expected lasting benefits and outcomes for conservation in Minnesota? And this is another one where each member's perspective may be different on exactly what that means. The question on if this project or program does not have permanent outcomes, describe why it is important to undertake it this time. So this question was newly added this year. The language existed in the past, but it was separated out into 2 separate questions. So likely this will require some revision for next year to ensure we're getting adequate and complete answers from proposers. I suspect that there was some amount of confusion as to if we're looking for an answer at all, as in if the proposal does believe that they have permanent outcomes, we would still like to see an answer here to at least say this proposal will have permanent outcomes. So you may see this is another one where you'll find a variety of different answers. If we move on to outcomes, so these outcome measures are listed alongside the priority actions for each ecological section. And this is another one that's pulled from the 25-year framework, as well as the call for funding. Just to note, the italicized text here in the examples, that's written by proposals. So in this answer, we're looking for guidelines on how we could measure and evaluate their success in this region. So if we have a project that notes they're gonna see outcomes in any of these regions, the way that they measure and evaluate that success could be different. If we go along to the supplanting or substitution of any previous funding, that's more of a technical question. That hopefully is relatively self-explanatory, and the answer here should clarify any questions. That's another one. That's a good one that members could always ask staff about.
The importance of that is we're getting the proposer to commit that it's not supplanting. So when you read the proposal, if you think it's supplanting, but they've said it's not, that's something to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. In asking about how will the work be sustained and maintained after the funds are expended. So this is where we're looking for a proposal to describe within this timeline table here to say what are their plans to maintain the positive results for conservation or habitat. So if we've achieved good results in year one, how do we continue to see those results into the future? We ask for a source of funds listed to clarify the funding sources and show the way in which outcomes are maintained has been thought through sufficiently, is what we're looking to see here.
And the importance of that is, as you're reading it, some proposals will say we have another source, and some will say we're coming back.
Is that okay
That's a question
for us?
for you to individually determine when you're ranking the proposals, and for us as a group to discuss based on what people think.
The question on an assessment of how your program may celebrate cultural diversity or reach diverse communities in Minnesota. This was received in the past. This question was asked for in the past by legislators. And while it's not per se an aspect of a proposal that the proposals are evaluated on directly in the hearing criteria, this answer is often very helpful to have throughout the process. If we move through to the activity details section, I would say a fair number of these at the beginning at least are generally fairly self-explanatory. Will County Board be formally sought? This is relevant to a statutory requirement and generally is simply a notification in writing to a county board that there is land proposed for acquisition. We are asking, is anything you plan to acquire in fee title or in easement free of other permanent protection? So this is an example where there could be, these requests often come before the council, there could be an additive habitat benefit to placing a OHF NOFR on a piece of land that has existing protection in one aspect or the other. So this is another example of where we're asking that question and asking for justification for an explanation on the additional habitat benefits. If we go to the question of will restoration enhancement work follow best management practices? Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm on the right place in my screen here. By asking this question, we're looking to ensure that the proposed work meets the guidelines of best management practices and also to have proposals consider and account for their use of best management practices. So essentially to ask them to describe that we do have a plan, we have considered the answer to this question, and then for the council to be able to consider that answer. Let's see, if we move on to restoration enhancement activity, is it on permanently protected lands? So this is another one where we're offering a multiple choice selection. So the activity could be taking place on any of one or more of these examples, as well as it could be other, which could be a state park. There's many different options where activity could be taking place, and we're asking proposals to for that here.
And that's important because it's required that our work take place on permanently protected property, and you'll hear we got a proposal come in where that doesn't look like it's the case, and so that's not eligible. So we're asking people to commit to that.
That's absolutely right. And permanent protection can be in a variety of different ways, and that's where these examples come from, is to attempt to account for, we can provide the options to get an adequate answer and ensure that we can understand the legal mechanism by which this land is or is not protected.
So clarification, so these are all sort of publicly held, generally for the most part. What if, a nonprofit is planning on maintaining or managing that under permanent protection? Is that, where does that fit in here?
There has to be something more than just we're good folks, we're gonna do it. A conservation easement on land held by a nonprofit is a way to ensure that.
Okay.
I would say that could be an example of other too, if there was a, for example, like a nature conservancy held segment. I'm not sure that it's called a refuge. But for example, part of the Weaver Dunes that we saw yesterday, that might apply there and other.
What we don't want is to allocate money to a project that can go away.
No, I understand that.
So we're asking for why won't it go away?
That's right. The land use section, we're asking here about planting of crops and insecticide and fungicides, as well as neonicotinoids or fungicide treated seed. So the one point of clarification on these questions in terms of insecticides and crop planting is that it's not a direct requirement that fungicides or herbicides or crop planting not be used by any proposal. This is a question more so for information to consider. For example, there could be crop planting at the beginning of a restoration on a small portion of the land, which would likely be a different consideration versus a large, say, 100 acres that was to be kept in crop or planted rotation for many years afterwards, as well as the insecticide or fungicide question. Is the land currently open for hunting and fishing? That is a more or less a yes or no question. And in this section, we're looking to have the proposal describe, is this land planned to be open for hunting and fishing? And as you're likely where we have the statutory requirement, if we are acquiring a piece of land in fee, it should be open to public hunting unless there is another legal mechanism that prohibits that. So that's where we're asking for any variation from the state of Minnesota regulations, or if there were per se, could be taking of deer only, things like that is the answer there that we're looking for. And then when we're asking who will eventually own the fee title land, this is an important question to consider as well, in that it could be owned by a variety of different entities. The eventual fee title owner could be different and often is different than the proposer per se. If the land was to be conveyed to the DNR, it could be conveyed to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It could be held in perpetuity by the local unit of government, city, county, tribal, etc. So this is where we're looking to get some sense of where that land will eventually go. And relevant to that is the question of what will the land acquired in fee be designated as. So this is where we could see this proposal is specifically looking to acquire and add to national wildlife refuges. We could see this is specifically to add to aquatic management areas, wildlife management areas, etc. So there's, again, a long list of possibilities here, but we're looking to see that there's a plan and to consider the additive value to any selection made there. East lands be open for public use. That's relatively self-explanatory. We're asking there, if you're to acquire a conservation easement on land, do you expect any portion of this will be open to public use? And in the new trails or roads question, that we changed the wording of slightly from last year. Essentially, the goal in asking this question in the way that we did this year is to ask, are there significant trails or roads improvements planned beyond anything that you might need to directly access the parcel? So we figure it's relatively common and straightforward that you may need to build a small driveway to be able to get onto the land to restore or protect, to restore or enhance.
Can I back up a minute? Regarding will the east lands be open for public use? Yes. Describe the expected public use. When we had our discussion about this, I thought we had come down on describe the expected public benefit.
I believe that if I remember right, and I might not in the moment, I believe that was a question about the wording of the hearing criteria.
Okay, all right.
Which does include that language. The hearing criteria does. So this
Okay.
question here, we're asking more so directly about any planned use directly for the easement, and it's a yes or no, and then describe sort of question, at least here, is my understanding.
Okay.
Mhm. And then to go back quickly to the roads question, so we're asking if a network of trails or roads is planned beyond anything needed for access or basic maintenance, for that to be described there. We're also asking if there are plans for any larger roads or trail improvements or development, how will the funds be sourced for the building and maintenance and monitoring of those trails as well?
And we changed that because everybody and had an answer they copied from everybody else that said, well, we might build something for maintenance. And that wasn't what we were trying to get to. We were like, are you planning on doing something new that's bigger than just your maintenance needs?
Mhm. Yeah. So we hope to see
So we
that.
get a real answer, not a bunch of
Right.
words.
So we're hoping to see that understood in the answers to this question this year. When we're asking, will the land to be acquired via easement be restored or enhanced within this proposal? That's a general question to consider timing as well as the completion of restoration enhancement work. So is that to be sourced with OHF funds within this proposal, within a different proposal? We're looking for an accounting of the planned activities for any land that's acquired and the source of funding for that, essentially.
Before Tom moves on, I just also want to say, under the activity details section, all these questions may seem daunting, but the system triggers only certain questions depending upon the activity. So you won't see all these questions in every proposal. I'm gonna pick on Metro Big Rivers because they've been around a long time and they usually do all activities. So in that case, you probably will see all of these questions. But in other proposals that are just restoring and enhancing, you won't see a lot of these.
That's a great point. And the proposal template was built essentially to account for all possible activity types and answers. So essentially, I built this so that we can see all of the questions that may be asked. So that's a good point, that likely you wouldn't see all of this in
If
every.
it's missing for a reason,
Right.
not because someone didn't fill
Right.
it out.
Right. The previous OHF appropriation section, this is one that changed from last year as well. So the question is the same in that we're asking, has this project or program been allocated funds in the past? So we're not looking for an answer on, has your organization ever received funds? We're looking for, per se, if you're working on a specific lake, have you received OHF funds to restore and enhance or protect this exact lake in the past? So the change that we made this year is that we have this chart which pulls from most recently approved status update data. So a proposal will mark, we have received funds in ML25, 24, 23, etc. And they can search within this table to pull up that program. The amount spent to date, that's the amount I mentioned, comes from the most recently approved status update. So within this section, we allowed for a narrative explanation of unspent funds. The thinking being that the most recently approved status update could be several months ago. It's possible that a significant amount of funds could have been expended between the time of the most recently approved status update and the time of the proposal. So we'd like to give proposers a chance to explain why those numbers may be different today than they would have been in the most recently approved status update. The thinking on using the most recently approved status update is that it standardizes this information for everyone. It limits the need for proposers to try to do some complex accounting to say at this date, at this time, this is what we believe is spent. We're looking for a way to standardize that and keep it fair across the board. The timeline section, the activity type, activity name and estimated completion date, this is all entered by proposers. So this is essentially, we're looking for their planned timeline to see, have they considered how this project is going to be implemented in the future? Have they considered when they expect various portions will be completed? And have they considered at what point they may finish with various aspects of their proposal? So as Sandy was discussing earlier, there's different deadlines for acquisition than there are for restoration enhancement, and this could be reflected in the timeline here, depending on what is planned. So then as we move through the budget, this is, I would say, generally more or less self-explanatory. The definitions of the actual budget terms itself, we've included as glossary of terms that was in the call for funding request this year. And we included a copy in the packet so that in case there were any questions on how we as staff are defining per se direct support services, you can look there for an answer on that. The leverage source answer in the budget table, that's entered by proposers. So that could be, depending on the organization and depending on the activity type, there could be a variety of different answers there. Essentially, we're just looking for some explanation of where the amount of leverage that's expected and where the leverage is expected to come from. We see personnel here as well. This is another one where organizations may break this down differently depending on how they use personnel in their particular program. So in essence, the annual full-time employee here, this number, sometimes it could be listed for a particular staff member, sometimes it could be listed for a group. So the consideration here, regardless of how it's broken down, is the amount of dollars spent on personnel, as well as how much is requested for funding from the OHF versus leveraged from donations, private funding, staff time, as donation, etc. Capital equipment, we're asking.
Can I add one thing there?
Please do.
I just want to clarify, mostly for the new members, is that if you have a $50,000 one FTE, that doesn't mean you're gonna get that, the project. It means that you're allowing for that. And the projects work on a reimbursement basis, so you need to submit timesheets with activities, number of hours spent, and that's how it gets paid. It's not an automatic give, so.
Yeah, that's good clarification. The capital equipment section, we're asking for an itemized list of any specific items that are above the threshold, which is it 10,000 or is it 15,000?
10,000.
10,000, yeah. So this is where we're asking for, if a project knows that they're looking to purchase any particular single piece of equipment that could which could last longer than the program itself, may potentially be used outside of the program itself. Anything above that dollar threshold, we're asking to be itemized here. So if you remember from the May meeting, the biochar, that could be a good example of this, where that piece of equipment would have been listed in the proposal to say, we plan to purchase this and use it in this way. Then we have this summary information here. This is calculated based on what proposals enter into the online system. So we have the total amount of request, amount of leverage. Then these percentages and combinations are automatically calculated and should be, I would say, fairly straightforward.
So here the amount of leverage is 70,000, and that's just based on their expectation, because on the front it's confirmed leverage is 10. So
Yes, yeah, that's a great question. So if I can get to this section here, yeah. So this is another one where we changed things around a bit this year, is the leverage funding table. So in here we have 3 different categories of leverage that we're asking about. We're asking for a entry directly to describe which amounts are committed, which amounts are confirmed, as well as what amount is anticipated. So the difference here is the level of commitment that a proposal would be willing to confirm for these funds. So if I understand it correctly, the confirmed leverage would be the most secure, would be the most certain, would be an organization is pledging that these funds will and can be committed to these projects, whereas committed and anticipated is more so a general idea of we expect that this leverage can be secured, but can't per se commit to it. So the totals that's being calculated is more or less auto-calculated from the different entries from throughout the different budget tables, whereas the amount committed or confirmed is something entered where a proposal might say 10% of our total leverage we can confirm today will be present. Does that answer the question?
no. So is this amount of leverage
This, what's here, is this confirmed or expected or?
That's the total leverage, right?
Yes.
From this table here.
Okay.
Mhm.
So the question I'd ask there is, you've got the 3 entries, and then you have totals, and this isn't adding up.
Yes, that's a good point. I believe that may have just been a math issue on my part when I was building this template proposal. So the total leverage amount there, that's auto-calculated from any entries, so we could have an entry on leverage on personnel, we could have it on contracts, any of the budget categories. Whereas,
These 3 numbers should total the total leverage.
yeah, you're correct, and I'm not sure if that's maybe a change we need to make for the future where it will confirm these 3 amounts must add up. Yeah, please.
Mr. Hartwell, when we reviewed the proposals, this table did have a lot of error. Ask proposers to revise. We have checked every leverage table, so they should be correct when they come to you. And that is committed plus anticipated should equal total leverage.
And Kristen, your question was, how come the front page doesn't match this? If you look at leverage amount confirmed of committed funds, that's the same as what's on the front page.
Yes, yeah, thank you for that.
I had to look.
Yeah, and the definitional variation there, confirmed, we're meaning it's verified, it's guaranteed, or it could be legally binding. So that could be cash or a secured grant fund, whereas committed, the difference there is your organization is pledging to be able to bring these funds. That the funds are secured or guaranteed perhaps, but that the funds may not yet be in hand.
So shouldn't that number actually be something higher in column 2? I mean, right?
Yes,
Okay.
you would be
So it
correct.
is just the math.
So one of the reasons you don't have the proposals yet is because when there are errors that come from the proposers on that chart, staff goes back and says, make the numbers work. So that's why you don't have the proposals in your hand yet. Because we have a great staff that is keeping us from asking dumb questions over and over and over when they can fix it for us.
Good. I like you.
Some of us are still able to ask stuff.
No, I don't know who on this council could ask them.
Yeah, I think he was poking at me to begin with there anyway, but thank you for rescuing me.
So when we're asking for a detailed accounting of leverage sources and confirmation of funds, this is where we ask for a longer explanation of why you know that these funds are confirmed, or do you have these funds in hand, or are they expected to be in hand? Here, we're also asking the question about scalability, which is, I believe the answer to this is what shows up on the very first page of the proposal. So we're asking in this question, does the proposal believe that their suggested project or program is scalable, or why or why not? So a scalability question is always somewhat complex, as members might likely remember, in that this could be simple in that a program that seeks to acquire several easements of a small dollar amount, you could say we can increase or decrease the program scope. We could acquire fewer or more easements depending on funding. Whereas if a project was to seek to acquire a specific single parcel that the price does not change of, that could be a no example.
Or we had that with road culvert in Cook County. One of the counties where this is what it costs us to do the road. If we don't get that, we can't do the project, and then it comes up as not scalable.
Absolutely.
I want to go back to the leverage for just a second, because in the past, we have asked only for what is for sure. And our project proposers typically deliver a whole lot more than what they propose, and I know DNR says we can't possibly tell you anything except what's there because it's the rule. But they come in with 25% leverage. Consistently. We wanted to give them the opportunity to say, we believe we're gonna do what we did in the past. Not just what's committed, because it's unfair to them when they have a rule that says we can't say we have leverage unless we know for sure. when they deliver it time and time again, we were asking people, what's your best estimate? Now, we have to judge whether we believe it or not, but we at least have information based on what the proposer comes in. And you know what, if they propose to receive 75% leverage and they get 10%, we're gonna have a conversation about it. So there's a feedback loop that's involved, but we've opened it up so that it wasn't so strict that people were penalized because of internal rules.
Yeah, I think that's a very good clarification. In the way that Sandy's status update figures from earlier today are a snapshot in time, the answers to this question are also a snapshot in time, in that the confirmation of these funds could come per se like the day after this proposal is submitted. So we're trying to account for and give proposals the option to explain. We expect more, we'll be able to bring more to the table.
So are you saying, Dave, that Sheriff, that we should?
David's fine.
Huh?
David's fine.
Okay. That we should base our estimate or our pointage or whatever we're calling it on this table versus what's on the front page, or is that still?
I am saying we all have to make our own decisions about it, but we're getting more information that allows you a broader picture than what our response in the past was.
Okay.
The response in the past was really, I mean, think about it. They're putting in a proposal in May for money they're gonna get if they're successful over a year later. How many people really have fully committed money in the bank 15 months in advance? So we're giving them the opportunity to say, we're pretty good at getting this, here's what we think we're gonna do. And you have to judge whether you believe it or not when you rank it, but there's more information than there's been in the past.
I think our challenge would be, how good is their estimates been in the past, right? I mean, yeah, that, and you say, okay, they're pretty good at it, they've done 25%, but how do I know that? Right, when I'm sitting there with
That's
no
a
history.
reasonable question to be asking the proposers. I think we probably have some past reports which can get pulled up. That I'm gonna ask staff to prepare that before we get to hearings. So that if there's a discrepancy that's significant, we can spend a little time on that.
Well, that makes a huge difference, because thanks for adding that extra, because in the past, for me, for leveraging, if they didn't have any money or had minimal, I mean, I gave them a low score on leveraging it as far as.
We should have.
Yeah, so if instead of getting 0, they're actually gonna get 25%, that drastically changes.
Influences how you feel about it.
Yep,
I mean, can we get that information while we're ranking them?
the
Or
history
is
of
that
the
too
expected
big a stretch?
percentage,
Yes, I can work on that and get that out to you next week.
cause that'll help us, I would agree.
Are you sure?
We are going to do best efforts to
Yeah.
get it to you as soon as we can.
You just did.
There'll be a lot of caveats to that data, because we've kind of changed how this has been interpreted through the years. So what they promised and what they've received is accurate. What they promised is a little squishy because we've changed rules over the years.
I'm probably more interested in what percentage have they historically gotten. I would need for me to know, what did you expect and what did you deliver? I'm probably more interested in.
That's
What,
what,
Okay,
what
as
was
a
it?
percentage of your ask or
Yeah.
receipt, okay.
what did they
Yeah.
actually?
What did they actually get?
From previous
Yeah.
proposals, and we
Enough
understand.
information where it seems reasonable, or we'll ask more questions.
Yeah.
We're not asking for perfection, we're asking for
Okay, that
direction.
makes my life.
Absolutely. It's scary, Daryl, that we're starting to think. Making me really nervous.
You thought we were on the opposite side for so long.
And Mr. Chair and members, one more point to add on scalability is that the answer to this question should more or less be taken literally. The answer from a proposal is important in that we generally look to trust that their answer on scalability in a yes or no sense is correct and should be considered when reviewing.
Yeah, I will just say. When we get to the allocation of money, if there are. I'm just gonna pull an example, there are 12 people who say, let's give money, but it isn't enough. To do the full project, and they say non-scalable. The chair's proposal is gonna be more favorable at looking at if we have any slop in the system. Figuring that out, than if 5 people said, let's give them 50% of what they asked for. Hey, we don't have a consensus that we should do this, and it says it's not scalable. We're not gonna include that in the chair's proposal, because it doesn't, the group hasn't shown a high degree of interest in the project. So if the proposer says non-scalable, it actually is important information for you, for the chairs, for us in our ultimate decision. And we have on occasion gone back and said, were you really serious about that answer? And discovered that they weren't quite as serious as they thought they were.
Well, based on the amount of dollar requests that we seem to get and the amount of money that we actually have, if anyone says they have a non-scalable project, they better have a really good reason why.
That is exactly right. So,
First time proposers sometimes don't really grasp that, so.
but it's an important question to have the answer to before we get to an allocation process, because.
I would assume staff is asking that question of anyone who comes in, they say it's not scalable, they do the, are you really sure about that discussion?
I think there probably are a couple of conversations.
I have one more thing to add to that, which is probably pretty obvious when you look at last year's request. Obviously, if it's a single land acquisition, it's hard to be scalable unless they can figure a way to bring other money to the table. And generally, restoration enhancement programs like Great Oaks, grasslands, he just gets less stuff done if he gets less money. If somebody comes in with a single massive restoration and it could be scalable, it's a judgment call for council to be like, is this still gonna be worthy if we can only give them half the money? And you'll have to be the decision makers kind of on that.
And the DNR project with the conservation fund last year came in as non-scalable. And we said, you really mean that? If you get half the money, maybe you could come back, maybe you can find other sources, or do you want us to zero you out? And it came back, yeah, we can figure out how to do it in other phases. And then we had extra money, so we were able to fund it, but if we hadn't had the answer to the question, the conversation would have been very different. So we're asking people to commit to it.
It's a hard question.
And then as we move along down the line through personnel contracts, professional services, essentially we're asking for additional information on each of those budget categories. So per se, if in the table you see an amount that looks odd or surprising to you, we would hope that there will be additional information to quantify the ask in these sections. So this could be per se an ask on what is included in the professional services line. So this is another multiple choice answer where proposers can select from the options included or list those beyond in other. When we're asking about the anticipated number of fee title acquisition transactions, we're looking for a rough estimate because as you likely know, the parcel list at the time of proposal is not necessarily what will end up in a final report. It's a snapshot in time, as we mentioned. You can't always know, or a proposal could not always know the exact location and list of the parcels that are expected. So this is where we're looking roughly for an answer on that. To estimate in a different way where you may not be able to list them in a list, but you might be able to describe an estimated number. Easement stewardship is a question that is populated unique to programs that mention that they will be doing acquisition of easements. We're looking for some narrative explanation on the cost for easement stewardship and the way in which that number is arrived at. Travel, I would say the question in here, in this category are relatively straightforward. We're asking for roughly an accounting of anything unusual in the travel category. And I would say that's a general theme throughout these questions is looking for anything beyond the norm, something that might be unique or unusual, that we'd like the proposal to account for.
DNR, for whatever reasons, has, their equipment comes in as travel. Because they have a pool and they rent the equipment from themselves. So they need a bulldozer. They don't ask us for the cost of the bulldozer. They allocate that based on usage. And it's not equipment rental in our proposal, it's travel.
It's really weird.
It's really weird, but it's, they have a tough time pulling it out somewhere else. It's a DNR system problem. They're doing the best they can given their own system. So we've asked them to explain it.
That's right.
Since they get the licensing one all done, right? Can we fix this next?
I can work on that.
Then if we look at other equipment and tools, essentially here, again, we're asking for an accounting of anything that might be unusual. I would say typically the answer to this is fairly straightforward and expected. If you see a restoration enhancement program, you might see burn equipment, you might see rakes, shovels, tools and implements, things to accomplish the work of the program. If there was anything particularly unique here, this is where we could ask it to be listed. Moving on to the federal funds section, this is where we're asking the yes or no question as to federal funds expected for match for this program. If a program marks yes, they do anticipate federal funds. The question of are the funds confirmed? This could be a signed grant agreement. This could be dollars in hand. This is where we're asking for some rough accounting of that. The confirmed federal funds may change the availability of an appropriation based on session law. So this is something that's included annually in the bill throughout subdivision 7, which is the availability appropriation language. So within paragraph 4, we have a note that money appropriated for a project that receives at least 15% of its funding from federal funds is available until a date sufficient to match the availability of federal funding. So all this to say, we're asking this question directly because it may or may not change the exact deadlines and dates that the appropriation is available.
It's not one you have to worry about, it's one that we need to keep track of.
That's right. Then moving along through output tables, this is these amounts here in acres are entered by proposers. So we're looking for some rough accounting of the acres to be achieved across the restore, protect, enhance categories in the different ecosystem types, so across wetland, prairie, forest, and habitat. The table 1A.1 and 1A.2, this is another one where we had a variety of different answers this year. Essentially, the goal of asking this question is to determine an estimate of our lands proposed for restoration and enhancement, ones that were previously restored or enhanced with Outdoor Heritage Fund dollars. So to answer the question of, is a parcel that was originally restored and enhanced in, say, a 2010 appropriation, is that come back up for consideration for restoration enhancement today? So this is one where we're asking, are you entirely restoring or enhancing lands that are acquired within this proposal, or lands that have been acquired with previous outdoor heritage dollars greater than 5 years old?
And then, if I look straight ahead, so if the table there, it tells you if they're doing restoration enhancement on the lands that they're buying. So you're not worried about, oh, we're buying it and then there's no plan for it. So that gives you an idea of, are you doing restoration of the lands that you're actually buying?
And this is a clarification because in the past, it wasn't clear, because it was all mixed together, you weren't sure exactly what was happening. This is our attempt to make it a little more clear.
Yeah.
At the end of your review, decide whether we got it right.
I know that last year when we were going through this, I struggled with the differential between restore versus enhance. And can someone give me a nice definition, very
I
clear?
will give you a very clear definition and tell you that nobody really is sure.
So why do we
The
have that?
the restoration word is. You're gonna take a bare field and you're gonna make it a prairie.
I get that.
The enhancement is we're gonna take a field that has some value and we're gonna make it better. Or we're gonna take the trees off to make it better,
Or treated bases,
and there is no way for the project managers to get that completely right most of the time. There's a lot of squinting in that, and that goes back to language in the Constitution that wasn't clear. We all know that whether it's restored or enhanced, its ending state is what we want to see, which is habitat for wildlife.
So
The
the,
exact definition isn't quite as.
so the criteria that we have restore, enhance is due to our legislative language that says we're gonna restore and
Yeah,
as opposed to us actually thinking, which is,
yeah, and typically, if you're talking prairie, it's more expensive to restore than it is to enhance, typically. But the level of restoration and the level of enhancement is gonna be different based on where you are, so don't feel like you don't fully understand it because nobody does.
Mr. Chair, if I could add,
Maybe you do.
we did add definitions of age.
Saw that,
Help
yeah.
proposers as well as all of you review and maybe try to split those areas a little bit more clearly.
I'm seeing DNR people in the back nodding their heads when I said about confusion. Mr. Hartwell as well, a lot of, yes, it's that's a fuzzy area.
Our definition. Restore and actions taken to return degraded or altered habitat into a more natural, functional, or biologically productive condition. Enhances improvements to existing habitats that increase ecological function and biological diversity without restoration.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I had always just looked upon restore as being like remodeling your kitchen and enhance as changing the countertops.
That's not a bad way to think about it.
If we go back to these output tables here, the prairie acres are native prairie. This is a relatively straightforward question. The total requested funding by resource type is another example where we're asking proposers to account for the way in which their proposed dollars would be spent across the four different categories of wetland, prairie, forest, and habitat. So we're looking for an accounting of restore, protect, enhance. Within those categories, where in the state and what kind of habitat do you expect those dollars to be spent?
And I would say this is the best guess effort, because what do you do when you are working in a wetland complex where you're doing wetland restoration and upland restoration? Don't hold people 100% accountable to the numbers, because it's a guess.
And then within the ecological section, the difference there being that those ecological sections, metro/urban forest/prairie, southeast forest prairie, and northern forest, those come from the 25-year framework and the call for funding request. So this is an actually mappable area that determines any particular parcel would be in these different ecological sections. So it's essentially, we're asking the same questions about dollars and acres, broken down into different ways. Then the average cost per acre, this is something that's auto-calculated based on the entries from each proposer. So we're looking here for some accounting of what does this proposal's proposed activities cost on average across these different resource types and ecological sections. So this is something that proposers may often use in comparison to similar programs is the proposed cost for restoration higher per se from one organization or the other? And is there a way to evaluate that between them?
And that uses the total budget, so it's not just what it costs to buy the land, but that's the personnel, that's professional services, that's everything all in per acre basis to do it.
Absolutely. Moving along to the parcel section. Again, as I mentioned, this is more or less an entirely snapshot in time. That said, it's still a important consideration and worth reviewing. The distinction being that, as I mentioned, a proposal may not know exactly which parcels will be acquired or restored or enhanced at the time of proposal. So this is where this list changes through accomplishment plan amendments, and what's reflected in the final report as compared to the proposal may be different. The process in which the question we're asking the process used to identify, prioritize, and select the parcels on your list. This is an important question to use and review. This is essentially the science behind the way parcels are prioritized and selected. So for example, if you were to receive a proposal that has no parcel list at the time of proposal, you should see an answer here to describe how in which the proposal would eventually select parcels for prioritization. So essentially, is there a list of criteria? Is there a set of circumstances wherein they would select one parcel over the other? How are those determinations being made? And then beyond that, I think we're listing relatively straightforward in the categories here. We have restore, enhance, and protect. The protect parcels with buildings. This is related to the recently adopted council policy, which is we're looking for an accounting of any land that is to be acquired with buildings. We're looking for the value of those buildings, and this can be used in council member review. And then all we have left here is the parcel map, which is auto-generated based on the entries in the parcel list. So if there's no entries in the parcel list, you won't see a parcel map. And again, this is estimated on the time of proposal. That said, if members have any general questions on proposal review, I know this is a lot of information. We're happy to answer.
Thank you for going through it.
Absolutely.
In detail, I think it's helpful.
Yeah. One more piece to note, we have this short handout, which is the upcoming important dates. So the deadline that we have set for as staff for proposers to resubmit based on the questions asked is today. So we're hoping to see when we come back to town that we have proposals resubmitted and all looks good. That being said, assuming all looks good, we expect we will be able to have proposals available online for members by the 24th, which I believe is next Wednesday. That timeline could move up slightly depending on the answers received and available time. Then it'll take about a week is what I would estimate to get a physical copy of a binder sent out to anyone who requested. With that being said, with the short timeline, we added a few days to the proposal evaluations deadline. So what shows in the calendar is July 14th, I believe, is what was listed. We've pushed that to July 17th to try and give members a few more days to evaluate. Then we have the proposal hearing selection at the council meeting in July, at the end of July, on the 29th.
So two things I'd add. One, there's a proposal number, which on this sample is not filled in. There will be a proposal number to keep track of it, which is helpful as we go through the process. The second is a question for you, Tom. There is a proposal that came in that it didn't look like it met the criteria. And staff gave me access to look at that, so I did, and I thought I'd just download the proposals. And there was a download all, but the button didn't work.
Yes.
Will the button work?
The button will work, yes. And so the plan, that link that you were on was just made for staff review and is not finalized for public consumption.
That's fine. I had not seen that before, which would be incredibly helpful for those of us that do this without the book, to be able to
Absolutely.
not have to download each individual proposal. So
Absolutely.
thank you for doing it, and I'm
Absolutely.
happy to know it will work.
The goal is for there to be a single button to download all proposals entirely, as well as a single button to download by section. So if we have PA is prairie acquisition, there should be a button to download all prairie acquisition. And I would just say if members have any technical issues with that web page or with downloads, to let me know, and I'm happy to send them another way.
Great. So the last thing is the criteria. This is the criteria we agreed to. I will say, as I've said in the past, don't worry about trying to figure out how other people see the criteria. Be consistent in how you rank each proposal. And the example we talked about yesterday, someone asked about leverage. I do a chart that says 0 to 10% is worth 2 points, and 0 and 10 to 20 is worth 4 points. And I put that on my scoring sheet. And mine's gonna be different than Kristen's. And it's okay, as long as we're consistent in how we do that and how we look at it and score these. In the end, the cumulative scores will be consistent and work well. So don't spend time worrying about, I wonder how everyone else is doing this. Just do it consistent to how you do it.
I just wanna go back to my point earlier. I'm not overly thrilled with how it reads. Because it says proposal provides public access use and benefit. I would think that the and should have been an or.
We can change that, because you're right about how we discussed it. So will staff change it to how we
Yeah.
actually discussed it?
Thank you,
Absolutely.
appreciate that.
Okay,
The meeting on July 29th then is the meeting where I won't be there personally. I'll have to do a team and they'll be the last bit.
good for you.
But that's the meeting where we're gonna go through and effectively select the ones that we're all in agreement on.
We will select who we will have come and make presentations at our late August meeting.
And my recollection is we let everyone come, as what's been being done.
We did, I believe, last year. We don't have to.
I understand.
So that is a decision that we get to make based on the reading of the proposals. And, you know, if Ted says, you know, this got a high score, but you guys all blew it, you didn't understand that what they said here doesn't fit the criteria, and he convinces us of that, we'll drop the proposal and not hear it. Or if it gets a very low score across the board, or if it feels uncomfortable to us to spend the time doing it, then we won't hear it. But in general, we've heard the majority of the proposals that have come through.
So that day we'll have the spreadsheet that shows what all of our scores were and all
Yep.
that. So that's gonna take us some time to go through that. I'm just trying to figure out my day, that day, what I'm gonna be doing when, because I got a 3-hour time difference, so,
So you're gonna get up early.
that would be my assessment on this. Do we start at 8:30?
We will start at 8:30.
I'll be at early morning wake-up call.
So we could on that day create our own algorithm, I hate that word, but and say anything below such and such a cumulative score, we're not gonna. Or anybody that didn't get a certain score by at least one person or something like that.
Ted, I tried that last year, didn't work.
The council can put any motion forward. The council can vote on that motion and accept or reject. There is no rule for how we do it. And there shouldn't be, because the circumstance of every year and what we see and the scores will change. So
I mean, my concern with that process is, does that mean anybody who doesn't get a score with whatever that algorithm doesn't get funded at all, is that what you're
Yes.
saying?
If we were to decide that day, yeah.
Yeah, if there's a proposal that doesn't feel like it's something we should do, then we
But
don't.
I understand identifying maybe.
Then we just don't hear it and that's done.
But coming up with an algorithm that arbitrarily. that makes-
Anyone can propose an outcome. We don't have to accept it.
Thank you.
The one question I would ask at this point, from a planning standpoint, we have a few more proposals than we've had in the past. But not significant. We have in the past done, we've allocated 3 days to hearing proposals. We've also allocated time at the end of each day to spend some time talking about those proposals. It would be reasonable to assume if we want to do this in 2 days, we're gonna have to have a little bit extended meetings, or we're gonna have a short meeting for a third day. Is there any desire from the council so we can start planning? I mean, I'd rather do it in 2 long days than come back for a third half day, but that's me. And this is a joint decision of all the council for how we do it. I know in years past, one year we went till 8 o'clock at night and we brought some pizza in so that we could do it in 2 days. But that's up to the council in general, but I think from a planning standpoint, it would be helpful to staff. We know we don't have 100 proposals, so we have to have 3 days. But it would be 2 long days, assuming most of these proposals are heard. Would the council prefer to do 2 or 3 days?
I'll throw out there, I prefer to do 2 days. Simply because when you add a third day, those overnights, you lose some continuity, but that's just my perspective. I've got them all 3 blocked out.
Perfect. Ed, 2, your 2.
2's fine with me.
Fine, go ahead.
Decided, so I'll go, whatever.
Okay.
I can make either one work, so.
Ron, do you care? Or Senator Lang?
I like the 2 days.
Yeah, I like the 2 days too, even if it goes a little long.
All right, the majority is 2 days. We'll plan. We have a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Do you care if it is Monday, Tuesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday?
I'm not.
I'm hearing a Monday, Tuesday. I'm hearing
I'd probably say Tuesday, Wednesday.
a Tuesday, Wednesday.
I'm flexible.
I can do either.
Your chair will decide. Since we have no strong one way or the other, I'll work with staff and we'll come up with a recommendation, which we'll send it out as quickly as we can, so that you can make that plan. All right. Any other questions on the process? All right. Thank you, Joe and Tom, for taking us through that.
Was helpful.
Next is, update on the DNR continuous improvement project. We have Melissa and Kirsten.
Good morning. Can you all hear me all right?
You can, thank you.
I'm going to attempt to share my screen, if that is amenable to everyone.
We see it, thank you.
All right. Now. All right. Well, good morning, Mr. Chair, members. My name is Melissa Kuski. I'm the Director of the Ecological and Water Resources Division at the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you virtually today to provide an update on our stream restoration and enhancement process improvement work group. I'm excited to share our efforts to date and will be even more so if you'll have me back at the end of the year to share with you the outcomes of our efforts on this front. Quick overview of what I'll walk through today, and I appreciate that we're a bit behind schedule, so I may zip through some of the refresher components, but I'll provide a bit of a background for our process improvement work group and how it came to be. And then I'll walk you through the development of the work group and their focus in these months ahead and our project timeline and expected outcomes. And of course, be happy to take your questions. So with that, what brought this effort together? The DNR always strives to provide exemplary customer service while meeting our important statutory obligations to protect Minnesota's public waters and rare species. We recognize the importance of environmental review and regulatory decision timelines and how they can be deeply impactful to various project timelines and costs. Stream restoration and enhancement projects that occur across Minnesota have meaningful benefits for our natural resources. Partners in this work shared frustration with us regarding the length of time it takes to complete these important projects. As a partner in this work, the DNR is committed to supporting high-quality stream restoration and enhancement projects and identifying ongoing opportunities for programmatic improvement. Assistant Commissioner Katie Smith presented to the Council in January, where she outlined the relevant review and regulatory processes. She also shared timeliness data and provided some potential recommendations for additional efforts to improve efficiency that received Council support. Then in late winter, early spring, after engagement with LSOHC Executive Director Smitten and Assistant Director Pavelko, DNR officially kicked off planning for our stream restoration and enhancement process improvement work group. I'll spend most of my time here talking about that group and our goals for the rest of this year. These are just the high level, the regulatory landscape we're working within. And it kind of can give you a sense of why we thought it necessary to convene a broad work group to tackle these process improvements, namely because there are a number of processes and responsible entities involved, multiple state agencies, federal agencies, and local governments. The majority of our reviews and permits are being completed in a timely manner, and I believe Assistant Commissioner Smith shared some of that data with you in January. But we recognize for partners whose projects do require additional time that the delays are impactful. So we have been working to advance programmatic efficiencies and effectiveness efforts ongoing, and even after the work group's efforts conclude, we will continue to seek opportunities to find efficiencies and improvements in our work. But now to the main event, our work group. Launched earlier this year, we've convened a group of stakeholders representing the range of partners in stream restoration and enhancement in the state in order to holistically and accurately identify the root causes of delays in project completion. We have been and will continue to be engaging these stakeholders to map the process for stream restoration and enhancement projects, identify causes for delays, prioritize improvements, and develop tools to support efficient projects in Minnesota. There are 18 people on the work group. Each of these organizations on the slide has members in the work group. The group was assembled with the input of Executive Director Smitten and Assistant Director Pavelko, along with the input of organizations such as Minnesota Watersheds and Minnesota Association of Soil and Water Conservation Districts. And we wanted to try and include people and organizations that really represent a variety of partners and agencies supporting stream restoration and enhancement work in Minnesota. The work group's important intentions that are driving this effort is that partners and regulatory authorities in stream restoration and enhancement work in Minnesota have a shared understanding of process steps and how to effectively build project timelines around these steps. Also, that partners and regulatory authorities work together to identify efficiencies in their processes, and ultimately that partners in stream restoration and enhancement work in Minnesota experience less frustration in the amount of time it takes to do these projects. On this slide, it just lists some of the kind of regulatory and review processes that the group is talking through. But within these processes, considerations for improvements may include things like enhancing early coordination to formalize or better normalize that as a process step. clarification and adjustments to the current environmental review EAW process, potential development of a stream restoration and enhancement specific alternative EAW worksheet that better focuses the information on the type of impacts that are associated with these projects. Potential clarifications or process improvements to our work in public waters permit process, developing a new or perhaps even multiple new general permits for certain types of stream projects, rulemaking or rule revisions in the DNR or other agencies' regulatory authorities, and communications and collaborative approaches with external stakeholders to improve their understanding of the process and regulatory requirements. And while we do have a fairly wide range of options on the table, it's also important to be clear about timing, and we'll talk about timeline in just a sec. But namely, what can be developed and implemented this year, and what might be identified with the work group and prioritized for recommendations with a longer time horizon, and potentially additional approval authorities and processes. For example, developing guidance or finding some better ways to time or align our processes can likely happen this year. Rulemaking, if that's identified as a recommended course of action, of course, requires additional time. So we have an ambitious but achievable timeline. We are moving efficiently and with purpose to find and be ready to eliminate potential process waste and identify real opportunities for improvement. This project is being completed in phases from our project development in early spring of this year to the end of this year. And I'm here today, of course, to give you updates on our early progress and then look forward to joining you in November with reports on the group's recommendations and the quick wins that we're incorporating, as well as with implementation plans for the potential longer-term strategies. A little easier perhaps to see than that timeline slide, which has a lot going on, but to date, we have developed our project plan, assembled our work group of highly skilled and committed partners, and held our orientation meeting. We've conducted one-on-one interviews with each work group member to make sure that we better understand their experience with stream restoration project planning, review, and permitting. In the interviews, we focus on understanding the teams behind projects, where partners experience pain points, and what's already happened to try to address those pain points. We've asked partners to share with us their resources and guidance that they've been using or that they've developed so that everyone can learn from what's already been done and identify additional improvements that could be implemented. Some quick shared perspectives from the interviews. This has sort of come out from a variety of folks, is that everyone is experiencing some sort of pain point, but they're not necessarily the same. And so we know right off the bat that there's no silver bullet here, there's no panacea, there's not going to be one solution. We anticipate having a kind of a multi-pronged approach. And most importantly, everyone is extremely committed to investing the time in this work group and supporting the improvements. Our next steps is that we will have our first in-person workshop where we're going to build off the learning from our interviews coming up soon on June 30th and a second one in October. And of course, those workshops will be where we do this mapping effort, further develop improvements, prioritize those improvements, and then sort of start implementing on the one hand, and then building implementation plans for those longer term efforts. At the end, we aim to achieve consensus across the work group on the mapped process for these important stream restoration and enhancement projects, to have those quick wins implemented, whether that's as simple as a redundant or unnecessary process step removed, or perhaps a more standardized approach to early coordination and pre-permit reviews, and an implementation strategy underway for the longer term improvements. We're very excited to have our efforts underway, and we're looking forward to that shared learning and the improvements that will result. I had the opportunity to join the work group for the kickoff orientation session, and it was an absolute pleasure to be in a virtual room with so many experts and leaders in stream restoration and enhancement, and to observe their excitement at the opportunity to collaborate and improve this important work in Minnesota. We're so grateful for their participation, and very much look forward to reporting out on our progress in our shared goals in the months ahead. Thank you very much. I am happy to take questions and stop sharing so I can see faces.
Great, questions? All right, thank you. We look forward to hearing from you in the late fall.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the work. We're almost back on schedule. We really appreciate your help getting us back. Next is a presentation on the geologic history of southeastern Minnesota. We stopped.
Do we not have a Kirsten Larson?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Kristen?
Yes, hello.
Did not mean to cut you off, but I did, and I apologize.
Not to worry, and I will try to do my best to help keep us on track. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I just want to give you a brief update. Good morning, Chair Hartwell and members. My name is Kirsten Larson, and I'm the Strategic Land Asset Management Supervisor within the Division of Lands and Minerals at the Department of Natural Resources. I supervise a team that does the real estate work for land acquisition, sales, and exchanges on behalf of the land acquiring divisions within the DNR. Today, I'm just going to give you a brief update on the land acquisition CI project we've been working on for a few years now. I last presented in December, and we've made some strides forward since then, trying to take into account the feedback you provided during that presentation. So as we shared in December, we had a good year in 2025. DNR closed on 91 projects, which was a 30% increase over 2024. And turnarounds for appraisal reviews continue to be within our goal range and are hovering around an average of 23 days. Just another quick update, we're preparing to issue some tile line guidance after consulting both with partners and other divisions within the DNR that should streamline and improve our ability to address this type of title issue more clearly, consistently, and quickly. Excuse me. I think most importantly, we heard you loud and clear during our last presentation that we should gather both better and simpler data to understand project timeliness, even if that means we can't report historic data, which we were working really hard to try to compile from our system in a somewhat clunky way. You may recall that the two areas this continuous improvement project was focused on was improving the appraisal review process and the title review and resolution process. We had an easily tracked metric for appraisal review, which was the turnaround time for appraisal reviews in the appraisal unit's workflow tracking system. It was pretty straightforward. This year, our average is 23 days, and our goal is to keep that under 30 days. So that's great. This means that partners are more easily able to get a reviewed appraisal that helps them make an offer to landowners in a more timely way. And we know that's kind of a critical point in the acquisition process. The other phase, title review and resolution, was harder to track in our system, and we want to keep future metrics simpler than we had previously designed. To that end, the key metric we plan to focus on is the duration of time between when a partner is ready to convey to DNR and when the conveyance actually happens. So this will help address the issue we were previously running into when we were tracking timelines, in that many partners, when a project is initiated, they're holding on to parcels for some time, appropriately so, while they complete habitat restoration or enhancement projects. Or when they're making time to close their projects while they work with private landowners on title cleanup. So that was really showing a really extended time frame because we were including all of those various phases of the project in our metric. So the current and newly revised goal will be to have roughly 75% of projects conveyed to DNR within 6 to 8 months of the partner being ready to do so. So that means they've done their title cleanup, they've closed, acquired the property, put it through that restoration process, and are saying, okay, now we're ready to give it to your DNR. The key phases that make up that 6 to 8 month period include DNR's title review. So we'll go through and do our title review and title opinion. Our project managers will work through any title resolution that comes out of that title opinion process, and then document prep and closing. So that kind of is what makes up that period. We are currently developing a simple internal system to track this data. It's a little outside of our land record system, as well as a tool for partners to do that official notification to DNR that they're ready for us to begin preparing for project conveyance. Right now, we do that primarily in an informal way, and we'd like to just be able to have that system able to collect that formal request, and that'll serve as our starting point for that metric. So we plan to have that operating by later this summer, and then we'll be able to begin collecting data. I would be remiss on behalf of the team if I didn't acknowledge that not all projects will likely convey on this time frame. That's why we have that 75% piece. Given that there are always some title resolves that take time, oftentimes the most time consuming are when we're trying to go confine a utility easement or something, or when the partner is trying to go do that. Something else, or where we have something else where we need to have an external partner take some sort of action. But our goal is to have the majority of those projects conveyed to DNR within that 6 to 8 month window, and sooner when possible, because we know there are some partners that bring a really nicely packaged project that we can just move through and get done sooner than that. The other thing I'd also just want to caveat is that this is kind of our first take at measuring success in this way. It's probably an imperfect metric, given that a partner and DNR may not always agree on when a project is ready to convey. We may run into issues, but I think it's a really good starting point for just starting to get arms around what our timing is, and we'll probably plan to continue to make adjustments to the metric as we learn through this. So that's my brief update. I hope to have more information to report on in the fall, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have now.
Great, thank you. Questions? We look forward to your update. Thank you for the work.
Thanks all.
All right, now we're gonna move to geologic history of southeastern Minnesota. We thought since we're down here, it would be appropriate to do a little more education on what we've seen and what's going on here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I turn it on?
You can take over.
So members, as we toured the southeast area around Winona yesterday, we learned more about the rich habitats here and uniqueness of those habitats and extent of biodiversity in the southeast area. As we thought about who could present to help us better understand this area, I reflected back on a documentary that was out, I don't remember how many years ago, maybe 6 or 8 years ago, called Decoding the Driftless. You can look that documentary up. It's very interesting. And then digging into the credits, I came across Dr. Dylan Blumentreit's name, reached out to him and asked if he'd be willing to present to us on the uniqueness of this area, the lack of glaciation that caused it, and really kind of the history, the geologic history of the area. So I'll read his short bio as a way of introduction. Sure. And then we'll turn it over to you. Dr. Dylan Blumentreit is a professor of geoscience at Winona State University. Dylan is a native of Winona and grew up with the Mississippi River and the streams and valleys of southeastern Minnesota as his playground. Naturally, this love has bled into his professional life, where he continues to work on sediment and water issues in this region. He received his BS in geology from Gustavus Adolphus College and an MS and PhD from the University of Minnesota. Previous to working at Winona State University, Dylan served as geology faculty at the State University of New York at Boston.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me. And also thank you for all the work that you do. How did the tour go yesterday? Did you get a little bit of rain in the morning?
It got better as we went longer in the day.
Was Neil able to show you some fish?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Neil Mundell so I grew up in Winona. I lived 2 doors down from Neil when I was younger, and now I live across the street from him. And when I moved to Winona, when I got to Winona State, he had a project already set to go for me to work on. But the Cedar Valley Creek site is really important, I think, to me, both professionally, I take students there all the time. We work, I have a long-term assessment project that we just started, seeing how these restoration, habitat improvement projects develop over time geomorphically. So this is a student project that I started. But maybe most importantly to the people in this room is, so my mom is in her 70s and I have two young sons, one is 9 and one is 11. And my mom wanted to learn how to fly fish. And so we went out to that site. And that was just this spring. And it was just one of those perfect days where we were able to catch some fish, but more importantly, we were able to be together as a family. And it was made possible by the work and the people in this room. And as I sat in the back of the room, I just thought about like that one perfect morning that we had and how many other people across the state had that perfect morning as a result of you guys' work. So, really, I'm sure your hard work goes unthanked most of the time, but it is very appreciated. So thank you. Okay, so yeah, I grew up here in Winona. I moved away to go to college, went to graduate school in the Twin Cities, and was very fortunate enough to be able to move back and raise a family here. And so when I was 20, I couldn't wait to get out, but now once I started to have a family, we couldn't wait to get back. And so hopefully you guys have experienced some of the uniqueness of our landscape that we have here. We have some very passionate people, people who love the outdoors. And so hopefully I can sort of shed a little bit of a background as to why we have this unique landscape here in southeastern Minnesota. Let's see. Not advancing.
Doing try to click, left click.
Oop. What is that? There we go.
Does that work?
Oh, it might. All right, I'm gonna get my little pointer up here too. So that way I can. Okay, yeah, so that works. So the outline, really three things. We're gonna talk about rocks, right? We've seen the rocks and the bluffs. You can see some out here. We're gonna talk about why we have those types of rocks and why we have bluffs here. Then we're gonna move into karst. So that's one thing that makes this area unique, related to the type of rocks that we have. And then we're gonna move into glaciers. And so glaciers, this is really the definition, the drift, how we get this driftless area definition. And talk about why we were missed by the most recent glaciation and why it's maybe a little bit of a controversy. So we'll talk about all those things. All right, so first of all, sedimentary rocks. When I teach this stuff to my students, I rely pretty heavily on this publication series from the Minnesota Geological Survey called Minnesota at a Glance. If you haven't looked at those articles, they're very short articles for public consumption. So I use it a lot for my introductory classes. And so they had an article that was called The Ancient Tropical Seas and Paleozoic History of Southeastern Minnesota. So a lot of the figures that I'm about to show you are from that article. Okay, so the Cambrian and Ordovician periods, this is when we had the deposition of the sediments that later became the rocks that we have here in southeastern Minnesota. So what we're showing here is a map, southeastern Minnesota. This was all an interior seaway in the Cambrian and Ordovician period. So the Cambrian period started a little more than 500 million years ago. That's a really long time. So long time ago, and we had this interior seaway over the course of a little over 100 million years. So a very long time to be underwater. The Wisconsin Dome, the rest of Minnesota, these were all dry land during this time. We have the Blue Mounds, Baraboo area, Taylor's Falls. Those would have all been islands within this interior seaway. We would have had shallow areas closer to the Wisconsin Dome here, and that would have gotten deeper as we moved to the south and to the west. So the sea level fluctuated. We had a rise, we had a fall, right? As you might imagine, over 130 million years, right, we would have had sea level changes, and that's caused by a couple different things. We're very familiar with climate change induced sea level, but also the rate at which tectonic plates move, which can vary over those long time periods, that can also raise and lower sea level. So the faster the plates are moving, we would have created new material, and that new material has a lower density, so it takes up more space, and so that would actually push the sea level higher. It's not super intuitive, but that's one of the things that can affect sea level. So as that sea level rose and fell, our depositional environments would have changed, and so would have our sedimentary rocks. So here's our stratigraphic cross section. So this is the Mississippi River. Would be along the Iowa border, and I'll show you a map later where this cross section is. But so this is to the eastern. This is on the Wisconsin border, the Mississippi River, and this would be more central Minnesota over here. Notice it looks like a little bowl here, or a giant bowl, right? That's because it was deeper sort of in the middle, and then it shallowed towards the coast. Early on, right? So this is the Cambrian in yellow. Then we had so that would have been started around 500 million years ago. Then we have our Ordovician, and then our Devonian in this sort of purplish color. So here's that cross section here. So this Mississippi River is over here, and then we go towards the central part of the state over here. So the sediments were over a quarter mile thick at the thickest place, about 1,500 feet thick. So that's a lot of sediment, but again, this is a long time to be depositing that sediment. So 130 million years starting around 500 million years ago. And again, spanning 3 different time periods, geologic time periods, the Cambrian, the Ordovician, the Devonian. So this is the skeleton coast off of Africa. And this is what I imagine our landscape to be like at this time. It was a barren landscape. There's no plants, no animals on the land. There was water, liquid water. And so we did have weathering and erosion. So we were able to create sediments, and those sediments were able to move around. They were really able to move around well because there was no root system holding that sediment into place. So wind would have been a factor, as well as water, rivers and that type of stuff. So that would have carried the sediment to the edge of the seaway. And then, as you can imagine, on the coastal areas, it would have been very sandy. That's going to be our coarser grain sediment. As we get farther out to sea, we would see finer grain sediment, right? Starting to get into more silt size, maybe even clay size. And then as we get really far away, it's going to be more ocean mud. And that's what this figure is showing here. So here's our shore face here. And we would have our coarser grain material, coarse to medium sized sand. And then that would grade out to mud, which would be silts and clays. So we go from sand to silts and clays to carbonate material. So this is our ocean mud. So what this means is that with sea level rise and fall, and with this texturally graded shelf, we record the sea level rise and fall within our sediments, which then later become our rocks. So as we're showing on number 1 here, this would be high sea level. We have our shore face up here into Wisconsin. Okay, I have a little thing on here, so okay. So we have this is our shore face here. We have sands, then we have our call it detrital mud, so that would be silts and clays. And then we have our carbonate mud, which is our deeper ocean material out here. As sea level drops, our shore face moves across that landscape, right? And that's what we're showing here. This is a cross section. And so we actually would get some erosion as sea level drops. We were exposed this area to erosion. And that material would then get carried out, and we would have our sands would cover up our deeper ocean material. And then as sea level rose, the opposite would happen, right? We would have our shelf move back into in more towards the interior. And so the result of that, this is a stratigraphic column here. So stratigraphy refers to the rock layers. This would be what our bluffs would look like if we were to strip away the vegetation. And this is our entire stratigraphic column. So the tops of our bluffs here are this Oneota dolomite. In the Twin Cities, we also have a very similar structure. So here we have the Oneota dolomite and the Jordan sandstone below it. In the Twin Cities, we have the Platteville, especially in St. Paul, Shepherd Road, Warren Road. You can see the limestone. You can actually see big slabs that have fallen down. And then below that, we have our St. Peter sandstone. So this is showing over time, we have mostly sandstones in this Cambrian period. Then we get some limestone or carbonates here. Then we have more sand. Then we have some more carbonates, more sand. Then we get some shales, carbonates, shales, and then really a carbonate thick sequence in the late Ordovician and Devonian. So what this is showing is transition between sandstone, which is our shallow areas, and limestone or carbonates, which are our deep areas. The reason I kind of transition between those two terms, mostly they're limestones, but there's also dolostones, which we have a building stone here in Winona called the Winona travertine or Bisant stone. That's a dolostone. And so those are both considered carbonates. So I kind of use those terms interchangeably. So this indicates our sea level change through time. Then in the Ordovician, we started to get a bunch of marine animals. They started to proliferate. And at the same time, we started to get plants that appeared on our land surface. So plants evolve and thrive. And now we have the root structures in place to hold that sediment back on the landscape. So we're starving our seaway from that sediment moving out into the ocean. And that's when we get this transition from alternating between sands and carbonates to mostly carbonates here, because we don't have that sand moving out into our deeper ocean. And so our whole sequence here is really capped in this upper late Ordovician, early Devonian, capped with thick sequences of limestone and dolostone. So as I mentioned, we're here. The Oneota dolomite is the top of our bluffs. Jordan sandstone is some of this stuff down here that helps form the slopes. So the dolostone is a mechanically strong rock, right? When we say mechanically strong, if I were to take a hammer, it's hard to bust up. The Jordan sandstone is a mechanically weak rock. In fact, if you ever take this hike up Sugarloaf, you go through some of the sandstone up in this area here, and you can see all kinds of people who can just carve their name with a stick in it. So it's very loosely consolidated, loosely cemented. Same with the St. Peter sandstone up in that comes out in the Twin Cities and also in areas of the Minnesota River Basin like St. Peter, which is where it's named. But this dolostone is what really holds up our bluff system. So that's why we have a more resistant bluff system here, is because we have a strong rock, this Oneota dolomite at the surface. And this difference in elevation here is about 600 feet, which is the same elevation difference between the Mississippi River and sea level. So we're showing a pretty significant topographic relief here in southeastern Minnesota. This is maybe a better view. So this is Lake Winona, which is at the same elevation as the Mississippi River. This is maybe a better view. This is just upstream of here, where we have the Mississippi River, we have the bluff top. So again, this is about 600 feet in elevation change. We call this inverse topography. If you look across these bluffs, they're all the same height. So this is not, I've heard this before, people say, oh, we just love the mountains of southeastern Minnesota. Well, mountains implies that it was pushed up. Here, we've eroded down. That's why if we go outside of the river valley, outside of the driftless area, it's a much flatter terrain. We'll get to that glacial history here after we talk about our karst landscape. So we mentioned that we have lots of sandstone, but even more of these carbonate rocks. And that's what helps provide us with this karst landscape, which is a very unique landscape, especially in the context of the upper Midwest. Lots of karst in other areas. China has a lot of karst, Southeast Asia, Florida, Missouri has a lot of karst. But in the upper Midwest, it's not as common. So chemical weather, the demonstration that I like to do is I take a chunk of limestone, I should have brought some with me, and then I take some hydrochloric acid, and I take a little drop and I put it on the limestone, and you see this big reaction. And so that's hydrochloric acid, which is a stronger acid, more like a vinegar maybe. But our normal rainwater, so 7 would be neutral. Normal rainwater is about 5.6 on the pH scale, so it's slightly acidic. Given enough time, right, and we've had millions of years, given enough time, there can be a lot of reaction that happens. And that's what has happened. So the rainwater that's slightly acidic comes in and it dissolves over a very long time our carbonate rocks. Here's just an example. If you go to a cemetery, right, some of the headstones are made of granite, and this is a granite headstone, and we know when it was put in, right? We have the date right there. This is a marble headstone, and as best I can tell, it looks like it's from the 18 something, right? But notice that it's almost unreadable. And that's because when marble, which is derived from limestone, when it's exposed to the elements to slightly acidic rainwater over the course of 150 years even, we can see that it started to dissolve. Okay. Where the granite, which is made up mostly of quartz and feldspars, is very resistant to that chemical weather. So this is just an illustration of how susceptible to dissolving or dissolution this limestone is. So limestone and marble is more soluble, so it's more easily dissolved by those acids, where granite is less so. So the result is that when we have groundwater moving through our carbonate rocks, usually it's going to be limestone. Limestone is the most reactive. Dolostone has a slightly different chemistry, and so it's a little bit less reactive, although it still can react. Here's what makes our groundwater and our rainwater acidic. So carbon dioxide is the main thing. Also sulfur dioxide will react with the water to create, in this case, carbonic acid. And that acid is what dissolves the limestones. And so here's just some surface limestone showing some pitting and some troughs here where we would have the low points where that water settles, that will erode more because it's exposed to that water for longer. And in our groundwater system, right, so we can get dissolution underneath of the surface when we have that exposure to our groundwater. As I mentioned, different layers can have different rates of dissolution. So this figure here is showing a more resistant layer and a less resistant layer. right, or more soluble, so it dissolves easier, and you can see how those conduits, what I call them, because my background is in geomorphology, so surface processes, and hydrology, so water. I usually think of karst in terms of water. And so these conduits are going to provide more water flow, faster water flow than these smaller cracks. So they would start off as cracks, and those get enhanced by that dissolution. So the more water that goes in it, the more dissolution that occurs. And so when we have this dissolution, we form a pretty unique landscape. This is a block diagram showing that landscape. Excuse me. And some of it might be hidden from the surface, right? It kind of looks like business as usual up here. But underground, we could have these vast networks of cave systems. They might be multi-layered. We might have stream resurgences or springs coming out of the hillside. We might have stream sinks, or a stream is just flowing along and then disappears. So we call it, sometimes you might hear that being called a disappearing stream. We might have sinkholes. So here's a sinkhole that's starting to form here, where we're getting we have this cave here, and then the top is getting thinner, and so eventually that might collapse. A lot of our farm fields, if you ever are looking out, you see a circle of trees. It's not that the farmer doesn't want to farm it, it's that they can't, right? Because there's usually a big depression there. So when you're driving home, maybe look at some of the farm fields and see if you can see some of those sinkholes. So it creates this irregular terrain, and oftentimes it's a hidden terrain. So I've heard of, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard of farmers leaving a tractor out on their field overnight, got dark or something, and they come back and it's down in a hole. That extra weight for a long time created a collapse. So it can be something that that we wouldn't necessarily notice. Here's a map. This was done by the DNR back in 2020, and this data was accumulated over time. Calvin Alexander at the University of Minnesota compiled a lot of this data. But this is showing our karst inventory. So the red X's are sinkholes. So this is just Winona County. This is city of Winona right here. And so you can see on the upper portion, so on the flatter portion, we have a lot of these sinkholes. The blue dots, these are all springs where we have water coming out. These are typically found in the more incised valley areas. Then we also have stream sinks. These are the blue or the green stars. So there's a couple of stream sinks, and those things can come and go. When I first started here, I went on a field trip with Tony Runkle of the Minnesota Geological Survey, and they showed me a stream sink where a stream was just disappearing. It was beautiful. I've never seen, I haven't noticed anything like that before. And I was like, oh, I got to get my students out there. It's my first semester teaching here in Winona. And we went out there and there was nothing. There was nothing there. So these things can come and go. So these are, whatever, so the hydrology plays a role in that, but also they can get clogged up and close up, and they can reopen elsewhere. So it's a dynamic landscape. This is just an inventory showing the different stratigraphic units and where some of these features exist. So their sinkholes are mostly up in the Prairie du Chien and Haggard City group. So this would be the Oneida Dolomite, the Shakopee Formation, whereas our springs are going to be a little bit lower in the Jordan and St. Lawrence Formation. So this is just a way to sort of track where those features are. And if you can, we do have some public access to these caves. So Forestville Mystery Cave State Park is an excellent one. We have students that go there all the time. in our department. Our geology club organizes field trips to go there. It's pretty amazing. We do some geophysical work there. And then there's a private cave, Niagara Cave, which is in Harmony, Minnesota, fairly close. It has a pretty large underground waterfall. So that's kind of neat. And I like this image because it shows the level that water was over time. So this is the cave wall and it kind of goes in and out in that sort of hourglass feature. And where it's wider is where the water was eroding for a longer period of time. So pretty interesting cave features there. Okay, so then we're gonna move on now to Minnesota glaciation. So glaciers and ice ages. Glaciers, the definition, I think you probably all have a picture in your head what a glacier is. It's a thick mass of ice, right? It lasts for an entire year. So we have thick masses of ice, especially in our parking lots here in Minnesota in the wintertime. But the difference, what makes them not glaciers is that they melt over the summer, thankfully. And then they flow via gravity, right? So mountain glaciers usually flow down a valley, where big ice sheets, like what I'm showing here in this map, will flow because they accumulate, they have a dome, and they kind of ooze out like silly putty. Right, so if I had a big lump of silly putty here, eventually it would ooze out and be a pretty smooth, flat layer. So they flow through gravity, they last all year long. Currently, we have about 10% of our Earth is covered in ice, in glacial ice. Primarily, that's Greenland and Antarctica. During the ice ages, that's up to about 30%. So more substantial ice coverage. A lot of it in North America and Northern Europe and Asia. So Siberia, Scandinavia. And so the most recent ice age ended around 11,000 years ago, which when we're thinking of the context of geologic history, we just threw out 500 million years. 11,000 is very, very recent. So it was very recent that we were covered in ice. That landscape imprint is still here. We still see it everywhere we look. Those ice sheets, when they were here, were thousands of feet thick. In fact, the average thickness was somewhere between 1 and 2 miles. The maximum over that Hudson Bay ice dome was around 2.5 miles thick of ice. Here in Minnesota, which is, we're on the edge of our ice sheet, it was anywhere between 1 and 2 miles thick. Okay, so we're talking a substantial amount of water in solid form. And also, I like to use this example. Think of a gallon of water, 8 pounds. That's just 1 gallon. Now stack those up 2 miles. We're gonna flex the crust of the earth. That's enough weight to flex the crust of our earth. And so that can also leave an imprint. In fact, Hudson Bay is still rebounding from that 10,000 year ago flexure, right? So it's still bouncing back. I heard a story in Winnipeg that the residents that lived on the southern end of Lake Winnipeg were upset at the government because their cabins were flooding. And the northern end, the shoreline was moving out. And it's actually because it's rebounding faster on the northern end than it is on the southern end. So the government has nothing to do with it.
But they're easy to blame.
Yeah, but they're easy to blame. Yeah. So I have here an animation. I'm not sure if it's a play. Might not. So this is just showing sort of the ebbs and the flow of the ice sheet. And the sort of take home from this, it's actually at a good spot because we can actually see these 2 lobes that are coming down into, this is Minnesota here. This is called the Des Moines lobe because it ended right around Des Moines, Iowa. You can see Lake Michigan over here. So this is Wisconsin. And then we have the James lobe over here. So the point of this animation was to show that the ice, especially at the margin, again, relating to climate, kind of went back and forth and back and forth. Right? Okay, so this map here is showing some of those advances and retreats. We have two sort of main sources of ice. The first one cuts from the northeast where it comes through Lake Superior. So Lake Superior was a trough. A lot of the ice kind of funneled through there. We have iron-rich rocks there. And the result of that is the glacial sediment, when it's exposed to air, you get rust. And so it has this reddish tint to it. Where the other source of ice is from the northwest, coming across the Canadian Great Plains, where we have mostly carbonate rocks. And so that glacial sediment is gray. And where they come together, Carrie Jennings was my glacial geology instructor. She took us out to some sites where those two lobes overlapped. And you can see the sequence, much like we showed sequence of our Paleozoic rocks here. We can see the glacial sequence, red, gray, red, gray. That's where those ice sheets overlapped over time. So the whole point of this is showing the complexity of our glacial history. And so here's a more simplified map. Talked about the James Lobe through the Dakotas, the Des Moines Lobe, and you can really see those in this map here showing the topography. Right, so this is the Des Moines Lobe, where it's very flat. Good agricultural land, but very flat. If you've ever driven across Minnesota, especially up near Big Stone and Traverse Lake, you hit the prairie. This is called the Prairie Coteau, where the ice sheets branched off. It's pretty dramatic increase in topography on an otherwise pretty flat landscape.
So that's your Red River Valley then?
Yeah, so Red River Valley is up here. This is the flattest of the flat. And I'll tell you the history of that here in a second. But notice southeastern Minnesota, right? Really well, and western Wisconsin, really well developed drainage network. Right? You can see the streams. You can see the branching patterns, really well drained, really well developed. And that's because it was not hit by the last advancing glaciers. Okay, so we're gonna talk a little bit about the imprint of glaciers, glacial outwash. So this is the sediment that's transported by meltwater. So you can imagine we have 1 to 2 miles thick of ice. It's picking up a lot of sediment as it moves. One of the reasons why the boundary waters exists is because those were fractures in the bedrock, and the glaciers came and stripped away all the weathered rock. And so those fractures were exposed, and we have this beautiful mosaic of lakes up there. All of that sediment, though, got pushed downstream. So we call glaciers nature's bulldozers. They scrape up the high points and they deposit into the low points. And that's why much of Minnesota, southern Minnesota, is as flat as it is. So all of that sediment in the ice has to go somewhere. So as that ice melts, the sediment gets exposed and it gets transported away. Glacial ice does not discriminate against grain size. It can move a little piece of clay the same as it can move a Volkswagen-sized boulder. Water, on the other hand, relies on energy. So faster moving water can move bigger size grains. Slower moving water can't move those same big grains, only the small grains. So glacial outwash, the muds, so the clays and the silts are going to be taken away. Those are going to be deposited in a glacial lake or taken to the ocean. Sands and gravels are going to be mostly left behind. So this is a glacial outwash sequence. You can see here's a gravel flood, a flood where we only have gravel left behind. You can see some of that. This is a Hackford scale. This is a nice cross section. This is not from Minnesota. Neither is this one. We don't have these kinds of mountains here. But this is what the Mississippi River Valley probably looked like.
right? It was filled up. Not to the top of the bluffs, but about 100 feet higher than it is today with this glacial outwash. We can actually find Lake Superior agates. One of the trips my geology club love to take is they go just to Lake Winona to look for Lake Superior agates, and they find them. They're not very big, but they find them. Lake Pepin has them as well. So our glaciers were close by. They weren't here, but they were close by. And so our river valley filled up with the glacial sediment imprint of the glaciers. 85 feet higher than today. We can actually see, if anybody's familiar with St. Mary's University, that's built on a terrace that is that level of fill. Okay. Mentioned northwestern Minnesota Red River Valley. So here's a map showing glacial lakes of Minnesota. So we have Glacial Lake, Minnesota, Glacial Lake, Benson. These are pretty small ones. Grantsburg, Upham and Aiken. Glacial Lake Duluth, that was the precursor to Lake Superior. And then we have the grandmother of them all, Lake Agassiz. This is baby Lake Agassiz, I call it, because it's a very small portion of it. So this is, as the glacier is melting, right, we're providing a lot of fresh water. And that water has to go somewhere, but if you can imagine, the glacier is pushing the crust down. And so that water doesn't really have anywhere to go until it reaches a certain level, because it's creating a natural lake basin. So I said baby Lake Agassiz in that last image that we were just showing down here. This is Lake Agassiz at its fullest extent. This is Hudson Bay. Here's Lake Superior as a scale factor. Much bigger. And it had several major drainages. So at the beginning, it drained down the Mississippi River, actually the Minnesota River, which is why the Minnesota River has such a wide river valley until it gets to the Twin Cities, where it meets up with the Mississippi. And then the Mississippi down to the Gulf. We went out the Great Lakes through the St. Lawrence. We went out through Hudson Bay at one point, and we actually went out through the McKenzie River to the Arctic at one point. So lots of drainages that went to all different oceans in this part of the world. So major amount of water. We had, this is called the Big Stone Moraine. So this is glacial sediment that was left behind when the Des Moines lobe stagnated. It sat there for a while. It was depositing a bunch of material. And we had the ice retreating, and we had this whole area, Glacial Lake Agassiz, filling up with water. All right, that's the reason why northwestern Minnesota is so flat, is any nook or cranny that was left behind by the glaciers filled up with glacial lake sediment. Also means it's fertile land for farming. But once it reached a certain level, we had a major flood. Actually, two major floods that lasted for several hundred years. Lots of water. This is known as River Warren. So remember, we built up our floodplain here in Winona about 85 feet higher than it was, than it is today. Now we're bringing all this clean water, right? Clean water is key, because if sediment is being transported, it's not going to erode. But since it's clean water, we're going to pick up sediment, and we're going to erode deeper than what we started with. So glacial River Warren scoured the Minnesota River, and then eventually the Mississippi River, where we are right now. River Warren estimates, based on the size of big boulders that were moved, is 100 to 200 times more water than the Mississippi River is today. Probably it's more than that, because the Mississippi River is a little bit lower. So these are very erosive flows. So we scoured this. That's what allowed us to scour back down to our current elevation. Actually, it incides a little bit deeper, and then over the last 10,000 years, it sort of filled up a little bit more. So our tributaries, after we had that River Warren scouring event, our tributaries are now trying to re-equilibrate. They're trying to lower down to that level. And so we see evidence of this. This is work done by folks at UW River Falls. This is the Chippewa River in Wisconsin, and they mapped 7 different terrace levels. So as that river, as the Mississippi River cut down, the Chippewa River cut down incrementally as well. So the base level was lower. Just like if we lowered the base level, which is sea level for the Mississippi River, we would expect over several thousand years, the Mississippi River here in Winona to drop. This is a stream, Garvin Brook, near Stockton, Minnesota. You guys probably drove right past it. And you can see imprinted on the landscape these higher terraces. So it used to be at this level, and it dropped down to this level, and now it's at its current level here. So we're still working our way through the sediments from glacial times. In fact, there's also sediment that has ended up in our river valleys as a result of timber harvests in the late 1800s of our bluffs. And so there's a group from University of Minnesota, Mankato, myself, River Falls. They're working in the Whitewater to help figure out how much of this erosion is naturally caused from glacial times and how much of it is derived from that human component. Actually, there's also somebody from the DNR working with that group too. Okay, so driftless area. What is the driftless area? This is my map of, this is us, the red dot is us. That's an error. There's an animation, the map will appear, I just forgot to bring the dot with it. So glacial drift, this is a term that is no longer used by geologists anymore. But it means any kind of sediment that is deposited as a result of glaciation. So driftless means no glacial sediments. And this is a map. This was a study that came out from, it's a publication that came out. It was published by the Wisconsin Natural History and Geological Survey, but it was done in conjunction with geologists from Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin. So everybody was kind of involved. And this is showing the timing. This image here is showing the timing of our glacial advances. So the true driftless area is mostly here in Wisconsin. And we actually find evidence of glacial drift or glacial deposits in our part of Minnesota, so this side of the Mississippi River. However, if you look at the time, so this dark kind of greenish, this is our pre-Illinoisan glaciation, which was 500,000 to 2.5 million years ago. So it's been a long, long time since we were glaciated here in southeastern Minnesota. The most recent one was ended around 10,000 years ago. Really didn't come very close to where we are here. Okay, certainly we have the imprint here from the glacial outwash, but we were not covered with ice. So this is where the controversy comes into play. Also, southeastern Minnesota, and this has really been something that's proliferated a lot since I left when I left for college. It's become a cultural identity in this area. And so there is a cultural and a practical definition. The practical definition is that this area of Minnesota looks and behaves more like the driftless area than any other physiographic landscape in the area. So just to back up a little bit, where this controversy started was there was a proposal to create a national park, and I don't know, maybe some of you are involved with this, but a proposal to create a national park called the Driftless Area, and Minnesota would have been part of that. And the glacial geologists got together, and there's folks from Minnesota who said, they actually wrote a letter explaining why this is not technically the driftless area. I was able to get involved in this conversation a little bit because being from this area, the cultural definition, the practical definition But their point was, if we're gonna name a national park something, it should be accurate. And I kind of side with them on that. But for culturally and practicality, this area here in southeastern Minnesota is driftless, right? It meets all the criteria. It fits the landscape definition, which is we have deep and sized valleys, which you guys experience, steeper bluffs. We have a lack of lakes. We don't have any natural lakes in this area other than our floodplain lakes. So Lake Winona is a floodplain lake. It's a former path of the Mississippi River. Lake Pepin is an impoundment. It's a natural impoundment of the Mississippi River. So those are the only two lakes in natural lakes in southeastern Minnesota, but both river lakes. And then we also have a very dense network of streams and rivers. So in that paper by the Wisconsin Geological Survey, they defined this area as the driftless area, all in Wisconsin. And they called this area of Minnesota and Iowa driftless style topography. Doesn't quite roll off the tongue. So I still call this part of Minnesota the driftless area, even though I am a geologist and it doesn't technically meet the definition. I think culturally, practically, it does meet the definition.
We've established a national wildlife refuge in Iowa,
Okay,
in that driftless, like called the driftless area.
Yeah.
National Wildlife Refuge, so.
yeah. Has there been any backlash on that?
Not that I'm aware of, we never really got any backlash about it.
That's good.
That
That's
I'm
good.
aware of.
Your geologist missed it.
So driftless area, thick sheets of ice surrounded this whole area. And so really there is an impact on even the true driftless area from glacial outwash. There's also colder climate. So one of the things that they mentioned in the film was there's these little islands of holdout vegetation that it's from when the glaciers were close by. It was much colder here, but as the glaciers receded, there's these areas where cold air was coming out of the bluffs. Right, so it's a very consistent 50 degrees. Cold air is coming in, so these plants were able to thrive in these algific talus slopes, is what they call them. And so colder climate, and then also we talked about the crustal flexure. So I will end there. Hopefully I didn't get over too much over time. Happy to take questions if there are any. Happy to bow out and let you all continue with your day. I know you've been down here for a while, so probably excited to move on.
On the driftless refuge there, they do have some of those areas where it is a freaky experience. 90 degrees out, you're standing there and you get cold air blowing in your face.
Yeah.
It's an amazing experience.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we have such a great trout fishery in this area, is because so the air comes out at a very consistently cold temperature, but also the water comes out at a consistently cold temperature that the fish like. So we have stocked brown trout, but we also have native brook trout areas. In fact, I was just at one a couple weeks ago where the landowner was like, "Don't tell anyone." He doesn't want people to come fish. But yeah, it is a unique landscape, and you know, if you ever want to experience it, go to one of those caves, because it's a noticeable, especially on a hot day.
Bring your coat.
Bring a coat, yeah. Yep.
You've been to the caves, the Forestville caves? Oh gosh, we should go. It's cool. I've taken my kids there.
Yeah.
When they turn the lights off, you wanna talk about darkness?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But it's very cool. You should go see it. We're not very far away. You guys can go there this afternoon.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Oh, very cool, but I sent you a note. I'd like to get a copy of that presentation you talked about, and I actually sent my son a note He works at home, and I said, he should be logged in, watching the YouTube when you're presentation. Whitewater State Park is one of his favorite areas, and so that
Oh, yeah.
he does a lot of trout fishing down there.
Oh, Whitewater, yeah, that's one of, during COVID, we were there at least twice a week with the kids. Yeah, it's a special place. If you are interested, if you guys found this interesting, the film is a little bit more of it's less scientific. It's an adventure documentary. And what they did is they brought two filmmakers in. One was from Sweden and one was from North Carolina. And it was truly about them discovering this area. And they had the filmmakers, the producers were based out of La Crosse and Winona. And they brought they lined up all of the sites, but the filmmakers, the people who did the filming and the hosts, it was truly like them discovering new things. That was also, I started here in 2016, and I moved into my office about a month before classes start, and there was a business card taped to my door. And it was George Howe, one of the producers. And I was like, hey, should I call this guy? I call him, and it was 2 years of planning and we went out, took some amazing drone footage. They lost everything from the day that I did it. So if you watch the film, I'm the only one in a coat and a winter hat. Everybody else is in the summertime, because they had to come back and refilm that part of it. But that's just part of it. So you see these films that are out there, and it's there's a lot that goes into it. I didn't quite understand until I got to be a part of it. And it's won a bunch of awards. I think it might be the most, or it was the most viewed documentary for California public broadcasting, which is kind of weird.
That's really weird.
But they still play it in Wisconsin and Minnesota and PBS all the time.
I have it recorded on my DVR.
Yeah. And if anybody wants, I show it to my students, so I can send a link it's the editor's version. But if anybody has trouble finding it, just see if you wanna reach out.
Send it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'd like to see that, yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah, it's good.
Send
Yeah.
Christina a link that she can send all of us, but yeah,
Sure.
very interesting, thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you so much. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
With that, we have no public signed up to make public testimony. We will adjourn the meeting. Wish you all the best of the next few weeks before you get the proposal, or week before you get the proposal to start reading and lose part of some.
Buying myself a new pair of reading glasses.
There you go. Hey, thanks.
Safe travels back, guys.
All right, we are adjourned.
Hey, Matt.
Thank you.